Beneath our feet lies a world of stone and shadow. The air grows cold and still as you descend into the silent heart of a medieval catacomb, a place where history does not rest but waits. Today, we are venturing into these underground labyrinths to uncover 35 of history's most baffling and eerie unsolved mysteries. You will discover secrets locked in bone, cryptic symbols with no translation, and enigmas that have defied explanation for centuries. How did an entire cinema appear deep within the forbidden tunnels of Paris? Why would a child's toy be buried with a powerful bishop? We will explore these puzzles and many more. What do you believe is waiting for us in the dark? Our first mystery begins with a single man and a simple, tragic mistake. In 1793, a hospital doorkeeper named Philibert Aspert took a lantern and descended into the quarries beneath Paris, perhaps seeking a cache of fine liqueur stored by monks. He never returned. For 11 years, he was simply a missing person, one of many swallowed by the city's underground. Then, in 1804, workers clearing a new tunnel made a ghastly discovery. There, leaning against a wall in a remote gallery, was a perfectly preserved, mummified corpse, still clutching its rusted lantern and set of keys. His identity was confirmed by the uniform he wore. Philibert had been found barely 300 feet from an exit staircase, a short walk in the light, but an impossible journey in the absolute consuming dark. This story underscores the terrifying reality of these spaces. The Paris catacombs are not a single, curated tourist path. They are a sprawling, unmapped labyrinth, a geological echo of the city above. Over 200 miles of tunnels twist and turn, carved over centuries as limestone quarries. When you stand in those silent passages, every direction looks identical. The walls are rough stone, the ceiling is low, and the only sound is the drip of water and the beat of your own heart. There are no street signs, no landmarks, only an endless repetition of stone and shadow. Even modern urban explorers, known as cataphiles, who venture there with detailed maps and modern lights, speak of a palpable psychological pressure, a feeling the very walls are shifting to confuse you. So what happened to Philibert Aspert? The official explanation is tragically straightforward. He became disoriented, his lantern fuel ran out, and he was plunged into a blackness so complete it feels physical. He would have wandered until exhaustion, his shouts absorbed by the endless stone, until the cold and thirst claimed him. Yet this very simplicity breeds deeper questions. Why did he venture so far alone? Was it truly an accident, or did he flee from something he encountered in those depths? His body was found posed almost peacefully, not in a frantic scramble. It is a haunting image that forces us to wonder if the greatest mystery of the catacombs is not what they contain, but what they do to the human mind trapped within them. The darkness here is not just an absence of light, it is an active, ancient silence that seems to listen back. That profound darkness conceals more than lost souls. It also hides messages from the ancient world, messages we can see but cannot fully understand. Far to the south, beneath the sun-baked earth outside Rome, lies a different kind of labyrinth. The Roman catacombs are not quarries but sacred burial networks, miles of tunnels lined with shelf-like graves. In one of these, perhaps in the catacombs of Domitilla, there is a small, square burial chamber called a cubiculum that has left historians utterly perplexed. Its walls are covered in beautiful, delicate frescoes. You can see the classic early Christian image of the Good Shepherd, a gentle figure carrying a lamb across his shoulders, a symbol of salvation and care. But look closer at the surrounding art. Next to this serene Christian scene, you might find detailed paintings of simple farming tools, a plowshare or a sickle, resting against the wall as if waiting for the harvest. In another corner, the careful geometric patterns of a star chart or a zodiac symbol might grace the ceiling. This is the core of the mystery. Why are these symbols together? Scholars have debated this for generations. One theory suggests this was a family tomb from a time of great transition. Imagine a wealthy Roman family in the 3rd or 4th century, as Christianity is slowly spreading but is not yet the official religion of the empire. Some members of the household may have converted, drawn to the new faith's message. Others, perhaps the grandparents or more traditional relatives, still held to the old Roman gods and the agricultural cycles that dictated life. To honor everyone and ensure peace in the afterlife, the family simply combined the imagery: the good shepherd for the Christian son, the tools of harvest for the pagan father who valued hard work and the bounty of the earth. It was a practical, loving compromise in paint and plaster. A second, more intriguing theory proposes this was not compromise but camouflage. During periods of persecution, openly displaying Christian symbols could be dangerous. By placing their secret Christian imagery, like the Good Shepherd, amidst common pagan or everyday symbols, a community could hide their faith in plain sight. To a Roman soldier making a cursory inspection, the chamber might look like any other pagan tomb. But to a fellow believer, it was a clear statement of faith, a coded room whispering its truth only to those who knew how to listen. The visual contrast is striking. The Christian symbols often feel universal and spiritual, focused on salvation and the soul. The pagan and agricultural symbols feel deeply rooted in the physical world, in the turning of the seasons and the daily labor of life. This cubiculum does not give us answers. Instead, it presents a silent, beautiful question about identity, belief, and how people navigate a changing world. It reminds us that the past is rarely simple, and that human faith is often a mosaic pieced together from the fragments of the world around us. What other secrets might be hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to see the connections? The mosaic of faith in those Roman tombs shows how catacombs could hide meaning in plain sight. But some underground networks were used to hide things of a far more material and dangerous value. During the Second World War, the port city of Odessa on the Black Sea became a frantic battleground. When Axis forces occupied the city, a fierce resistance movement took root not in the streets but beneath them. The Odessa catacombs are not burial tunnels but another type of labyrinth entirely. They are ancient limestone quarries, a staggering underground web stretching for more than 2,500 kilometers. To put that impossible scale into perspective, if you could lay all those tunnels end to end, they would reach from Paris to Moscow. This was not a single defined maze. It was a subterranean city with countless entrances, dead ends, and uncharted passages. For the Soviet partisans, it was the perfect fortress. From these dark depths, they launched guerrilla raids, stored supplies, and sheltered the wounded. And according to a persistent legend, they also hid a fortune. As the Axis forces retreated in chaos in 1944, the story goes that partisans intercepted a convoy laden with loot. This was not ordinary war material. The treasure, as the tale describes it, consisted of crates filled with gold bullion, precious church icons, masterpieces of art plundered from museums and palaces, and perhaps even sensitive documents. Unable to move it and desperate to keep it from falling back into enemy hands, a small, trusted team supposedly dragged the heavy crates deep into the most remote, unmapped sections of the catacombs. They concealed the treasure in a natural chamber or a side tunnel, perhaps rigging crude but effective booby traps of fallen rock or grenades to protect it. Then the legend turns dark. It is said the team's leader, ensuring the secret's safety, took a final, brutal measure. He allegedly sealed the chamber from the outside, with the rest of the treasure team still inside. Since that day, the Odessa treasure has become a ghost. Post-war, numerous expeditions, both official and clandestine, have ventured into the quarries with old partisan maps and modern metal detectors. They have found abandoned bunkers, rusted weapons, and poignant personal items, but no stacked crates of gold or art. The sheer, overwhelming size of the network makes the search futile. You could walk for a lifetime and cover only a fraction of it, So what is the truth? Skeptics argue the treasure is a myth, a wartime rumor that grew with each telling, a symbolic story of resistance rather than a real cache. Others propose a more practical, if cynical, solution. Perhaps a small group did find it in the post-war confusion and quietly spirited it away, leaving the legend intact to cover their tracks. But the most haunting possibility is that the treasure is still there. It waits in a chamber where the air has been still for 80 years, where dust settles on wooden crates, in a tunnel so cleverly hidden or so tragically sealed that it has become a tomb for both men and mystery. The catacombs of Odessa hold their secret tightly, guarded by distance, darkness, and a story that may be the most effective booby trap of all. From the shadowy politics of hidden treasure, we move to a place where the line between the living and the dead feels painfully thin. In a quiet corner of Sicily, the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo hold a collection that is both profoundly sacred and deeply unsettling. Here, in cool, dimly lit corridors, thousands of mummified bodies stand, sit, or lie in repose. But it is the children who stop visitors in their tracks. They are dressed in fine lace and velvet, their Sunday best, with ribbons in their hair and tiny shoes on their feet. They look as if they might simply be sleeping, preserved with an almost cruel perfection by the unique dry air of the catacombs and the skilled embalming practices of the Capuchin monks. This was part of a centuries-old tradition known as the cult of the dead, where displaying the preserved bodies of loved ones was not morbid, but a sign of respect and a way to keep the family physically present within the community. It was a silent, stone testament to the belief that death was not an end but a change of state. Yet, within this cultural context, personal mysteries linger. For many of these children, their precise causes of death are lost to time. In an era before modern medicine, a sudden fever, a congenital illness, or an accident could claim a young life without clear explanation. Their preserved forms offer no answers, only a silent, poignant question. Local folklore adds another layer of unease. Some visitors and even caretakers over the years have whispered about certain children being untouchable. They speak of an inexplicable coldness in the air near particular cases, or of cameras malfunctioning when pointed at specific figures. There are stories of bad luck befalling those who disrespect the space, a lingering sense that some of these young souls are not entirely at rest. This creates an ethical tension that hangs in the air as thick as the scent of old stone. We are confronted with the reality that these are not sculptures or historical artifacts, but the remains of real children placed here by grieving families. The act of viewing them, of walking past their glass cases, feels intrusive, a violation of a private grief frozen in time. The eerie atmosphere does not come from any imagined threat, but from this overwhelming collision of innocence and mortality, of love and loss, preserved forever under a silent Sicilian sun. To look into their still faces is to glimpse a history written not in documents, but in silk and skin, a mystery that asks us not who, but why we feel the need to remember in this particular, haunting way. That silent grief preserved in Sicily is a world away from the echoing halls beneath Vienna. There, in the catacombs of St. Michael's Cathedral, the dead do not rest in quiet solitude. They sing, deep within the labyrinth, past rows of neatly stacked bones. There is one particular pile that has baffled every visitor who hears it. It is a large, pyramidal stack of countless skulls and long bones assembled centuries ago. At first glance, it seems like any other ossuary arrangement, a practical solution for storing the remains exhumed from overcrowded cemeteries, but then you feel the air move. A faint draft, the breath of the catacombs itself, whispers through the narrow tunnels, and as it passes through that specific stack of bones, something extraordinary happens. The air begins to vibrate, channeled through the hollow eye sockets, the nasal cavities, and the gaps between femurs. What emerges is not a shriek or a whistle, but a deep, resonant, and unmistakable hum. It is a low, chord-like drone, sustained and musical, that many describe as sounding like a ghostly, subterranean choir holding a single, solemn note. This bone-chilling choir was likely discovered by accident, perhaps by a monk tending the crypts or a curious caretaker centuries ago, who stopped in his tracks as the catacombs began to hum around him. Modern investigators have since tried to solve the acoustic puzzle. Scientists and audio engineers who have visited the site suggest it is a remarkable, if unintentional, example of natural architecture. The stack is not random. The specific density of the pile, the way the bones are oriented, and the shape of the chamber itself all act like a gigantic organic wind instrument. When a steady draft of just the right speed and direction flows through, it sets the entire structure vibrating, much like blowing across the top of a bottle produces a tone. It is a macabre flute built from human remains, yet the question of intent remains haunting. Was this a fluke, a strange sonic accident that medieval monks simply accepted as a divine or eerie phenomenon? Or could it have been, on some level, deliberate? The monks who arranged these bones were deeply spiritual men, living with death as a constant companion. They believed in the resurrection of the body and the eternal life of the soul. Could the idea of giving the departed a literal voice, of allowing them to sing praises from their resting place, have been a theological statement made in bone and air? It is a compelling thought that this might be a forgotten form of sacred music, an architectural hymn where the very remains of the congregation become the instrument. We may never know if the choir was by design or by chance, but its effect is undeniable. To stand in that vault and hear that low, mournful hum rising from a mountain of skulls is to experience a mystery that bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to something primal. It transforms the catacombs from a silent tomb into a resonant chamber where the past is not seen but heard. If you listen closely to the audio accompanying this video, that sound you hear is not a digital effect. It is the wind of Vienna filtered through centuries of history, playing the final, enduring note of the departed. That ghostly choir in Vienna transforms bone into sound, but in a small town in the Czech Republic, bone was used to create something else entirely, a chilling work of sacred art. The Sedlec ossuary in Kutná Hora is famous the world over for its breathtaking, if macabre, decorations. A massive chandelier containing every bone in the human body, garlands of skulls draping archways, pyramids of femurs stacked like firewood, and even a coat of arms crafted from ribs and pelvises. The artistry of the place is undeniable, a startling meditation on mortality created by a woodcarver in the 19th century. But beneath this known spectacle lies a far older and more tantalizing rumor. Local legend whispers that the ossuary is not just a repository for bones, but for forbidden books. The story begins in the early 15th century during the turbulent Hussite Wars. This was a period of violent religious revolution in Bohemia, where reformers following Jan Hus challenged the authority of the Catholic Church. Monasteries and their libraries were prime targets. It is said that the monks of the adjacent Sedlec monastery, fearing the destruction of their most precious and potentially controversial texts, took drastic action. They allegedly walled up a hidden chamber deep within the catacomb network beneath the ossuary. This was not a library of common prayer books. The legend specifies it contained heretical tracts, alchemical manuscripts seeking the secrets of transformation, and philosophical works that contradicted official church doctrine. In essence, it was a vault of dangerous knowledge. This is not pure fantasy. Modern investigations using ground-penetrating radar have indeed detected unexplained voids and structural anomalies in the earth beneath the ossuary's floor, spaces that do not correspond to any known burial chambers or mapped tunnels. They are simply empty signatures on a screen, silent invitations to speculation. Why would this be such a compelling place to hide something? An ossuary, a place already sanctified by death and often avoided by the superstitious, makes for a perfect vault. Who would think to look for a library of living ideas in a palace of the dead? The contrast between the public display and the rumored secret is profound. Above, the bones are arranged in a clear, if shocking, statement about the equality of all in death and the Christian hope of resurrection. It is a sermon in skeleton. Below, if the legend is true, would be a chaos of conflicting ideas, texts that questioned that very faith, that explored magic, science, and rebellion. One space is about order and accepted truth. The other would be about the dangerous power of questions. So what knowledge might be lost in such a chamber? We can only guess. Perhaps there were unique copies of Hussite writings or older, pre-Christian Slavic spiritual texts that the monks preserved out of scholarly interest even as the church suppressed them. Alchemical manuscripts from the region were renowned, blending proto-chemistry with mystical symbolism, seeking not just to turn lead into gold, but to transform the human soul. The true loss would not be a single fact, but a snapshot of a mind at war with itself. A religious institution preserving the very ideas that threatened to destroy it, perhaps believing that even dangerous knowledge was still knowledge and worthy of saving from the flames. The bone chandelier above asks us to remember we will die. The hidden chamber below, if it exists, would ask us to remember what we once dared to think. The idea of a hidden library beneath a bone church speaks to a world of secret knowledge, but some catacombs wear their blended identity with breathtaking, open pride. In the bustling port city of Alexandria, Egypt, a different kind of fusion awaits, one carved directly into the living rock. The Catacombs of Qom el-Shakafa, whose name translates chillingly to Mound of Shards, are a 3-level deep funerary complex dating from the 2nd century. They are often called one of the 7 wonders of the medieval world, but their true wonder is not in their scale, but in their stunning, almost dreamlike architectural cocktail. Here you descend past a traditional Roman rotunda, only to be greeted by Egyptian gods with Roman hairstyles and armor. You see Medusa's head carved on a shield but flanked by pharaonic serpents. The central tomb itself is accessed by a remarkable circular staircase that wraps around a deep, open shaft, a well once used to lower the deceased to their final chambers with ropes. This practical feature feels like a descent into the very soul of ancient Alexandria. The mystery here is not of hidden treasure or lost children, but of a lost identity so perfectly blended it becomes a new, unique creation. Historians are baffled by the seamless syncretism. This was not a haphazard mix of styles. It was a deliberate, sophisticated fusion. Look at the detailed carvings. You might find the jackal-headed Egyptian god Anubis, guardian of the dead, but he is depicted wearing the uniform and armor of a Roman soldier, his posture classical and strong. In another relief, the Greek demigod Hercules stands with his club, but his features are softened, his stance echoing Egyptian statuary. Who commissioned this? The leading theory points to a single, incredibly wealthy family, likely Greek or Roman citizens who had lived in Alexandria for generations. They were not tourists appropriating local art. They were residents of the greatest melting pot of the ancient world, a city founded by Alexander the Great where Egyptian, Greek, and later Roman cultures lived, traded, and intermarried. This tomb was their statement. They were not choosing one identity over another. They were asserting that they were all of them at once. They honored the Egyptian gods of the land they lived in, respected the Greek philosophical and artistic traditions of their education, and operated under the practical Roman administration of their daily lives. Their afterlife, therefore, had to reflect this complex reality. The tomb is a puzzle of belonging. Does it show a family so confident in their mixed heritage that they created a new artistic language? Or does it reveal a subtle anxiety, a need to appease every possible divine power in the uncertain journey after death? The carvings do not answer. They simply present the fact of this hybrid world, a world where Medusa could protect an Egyptian god, and where a Roman well could lower a body into a chamber decorated with pharaonic symbols. In Qam el-Shakafa, the catacombs do not hide a secret. They proclaim one loudly in stone. That identity is not a single thread, but a tapestry, woven even in death from every culture a person has ever called home. That profound blending of cultures in Alexandria is a testament to life, but other catacombs seem to hold echoes of a far more anguished death. In the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, the city of Naples is built upon layers of tragedy, and some believe its sorrow has seeped into the very stone. Deep within the San Gordioso catacombs, a labyrinth of early Christian tombs carved from volcanic tuff, there is a particular corridor known unofficially among guides as the Wailing Wall. For decades, visitors, staff, and even skeptical researchers have reported the same unsettling phenomenon. In the absolute silence of the underground, especially after the last tour group has left and the heavy doors are sealed for the night, a faint sound begins. It is not the clear hum of Vienna's bone choir, but something far more indistinct and human. People describe it as a distant collective murmur, a chorus of whispered pleas or muffled sobs that seems to emanate from the porous rock of one specific wall. It is a sound felt as much as heard, a vibration of profound grief that hangs in the cool, damp air. Initial investigations logically sought a physical source. Engineers checked for hidden air vents, subterranean water channels, or even the distant rumble of the Naples metro. Acoustic experts mapped the tunnels, looking for wind patterns that might create an auditory illusion. Every time the results were the same. There are no hidden pipes in that section. The urban noise of the city above cannot penetrate the thick volcanic rock at that depth. The catacombs are acoustically dead, designed to swallow sound, not create it. Yet the whispers persist. To understand why this legend has such power, you must know what surrounds that wall. The San Gordioso catacombs were a primary burial site during some of Naples' most horrific plague outbreaks. In the 1600s, thousands of victims from the devastating pandemic were interred here in mass graves. The local folklore is direct and haunting. The whispers, they say, are the voices of those plague victims. These were people who died in terror and isolation, often buried hastily without last rites, their souls caught in a state of spiritual limbo according to old Catholic belief, trapped in purgatory. The wall in this telling is not stone but a veil, a thin place between our world and a realm of atoning spirits, and their anguish occasionally bleeds through. For a moment, try to stand there with us in that darkness. The modern lights are off. Your own small flashlight casts shaky shadows on the frescoes of saints that line the corridor. The air is cold and smells of ancient dust and wet earth. You hold your breath, and at the edge of your hearing, just below the threshold of certainty, you perceive it. A susurrus like distant waves or wind through reeds, but shaped almost into words you cannot quite grasp. It is the kind of sound the human mind, confronted with profound silence and the weight of history, is desperate to pattern into meaning. Is it a trick of the blood rushing in your own ears, a subconscious projection of the sorrow you know this place holds, or is it something else, an imprint of collective trauma left upon the location itself, a psychic scar reverberating through time? The Wailing Wall offers no evidence, only experience. It challenges not what we believe about the afterlife, but what we believe about the permanence of emotion and whether stone can remember a city's tears. The profound silence of Naples holds echoes of anguish, but in the cool, shadowed catacombs of Salzburg, Austria, the walls speak in a different, verdant language. Carved into the stone, often near a tomb entrance or on a key archway, you might find a face emerging from the rock. But this is no saint or angel. Its features are human, yet its hair and beard are not made of hair at all, but of lush, curling leaves and vines. Sometimes the foliage sprouts from its mouth, ears, and eyes, as if the man himself is disgorging the forest. This is the Green Man, an ancient pagan symbol of rebirth and the cyclical power of nature, and his presence in early Christian burial sites is a riddle wrapped in roots and stone. The image is unmistakable. In pagan traditions across Celtic and Germanic Europe, the foliate head represented the spirit of the untamed woods, a deity of fertility and the relentless return of spring after winter's death. He was a symbol of life force itself. So what is he doing here in a sacred space dedicated to the Christian promise of eternal life through Christ, not through the turning of seasons? This juxtaposition sparks a fierce and fascinating debate among historians. One compelling theory is that of covert survival. When Christianity spread into deeply forested regions like Bavaria and Austria, it didn't simply erase thousands of years of local belief. New converts, while accepting the new faith, might have held a silent cultural attachment to the old gods of the land. A skilled stone carver, perhaps a recent convert himself, could subtly incorporate the familiar face of the Green Man into his work. To a visiting bishop, it might look like a simple decorative motif, but to the local family burying their loved one, it was a powerful, secret nod to the ancestral spirits of the forest, a whispered prayer for rebirth in a language the new church had not yet taught them. It was a symbol hidden in plain sight, ensuring all possible paths to the afterlife were honored. A second, and perhaps more likely, explanation is not covert resistance but brilliant appropriation. Early church leaders were often pragmatic evangelists. They understood that to convert a population, it was sometimes easier to baptize a local symbol than to ban it outright. The Green Man, a powerful emblem of life conquering death every spring, was perfectly suited for this theological repurposing. The church could effectively say, "You see this face in the leaves. You believe it symbolizes nature's rebirth. Now look deeper. This is not just about trees. This is a prophecy carved in stone, a pre-Christian intuition of the true resurrection, the resurrection of the soul through Christ." The pagan symbol of cyclical, earthly renewal was transformed into a Christian promise of linear, eternal life. The vines sprouting from the mouth could then be seen not as a pagan grotesque, but as the living Word of God bringing forth new life. There is also a simpler human possibility. The Green Man might be the forgotten signature of a talented mason. In an age before written names, craftsmen often had their own mason's mark, a unique symbol they would carve into their work. A carver specializing in floral and foliage designs might have adopted the foliate head as his personal emblem, his brand. Its placement in a catacomb may carry no deep theological weight at all, but simply proclaim, "I made this." Yet, even this practical theory feels incomplete, for the symbol did not appear at random. It traveled a clear path, migrating from the lintels of pagan temples and sacred groves directly into the underground tombs of the new faith. This was a deliberate transplantation. So is the Green Man a stubborn ghost of paganism, a clever Christian metaphor, or just a craftsman's tag? The stone does not say. Perhaps he is all three at once, a layered symbol that allowed people in a time of tremendous change to hold multiple truths without contradiction. To stand before his leafy gaze in the silent dark is to witness a moment of profound cultural negotiation, where the old forest and the new church reached a silent compromise, their roots forever intertwined in the memory of the dead. While the Green Man whispers of life in stone, another Roman catacomb holds a mystery defined by an impossible weight. In the catacombs of St. Calixtus, among miles of frescoed corridors and crumbling tombs, rests a single, unremarkable sarcophagus. It is not ornate. There are no carvings, no inscriptions, no symbols to hint at the occupant's name or station. It is a plain, heavy box of time-worn marble, indistinguishable from 1,000 others except for one baffling property. It cannot be moved. For generations, caretakers and archaeologists have noted this anomaly. When the need arose to rearrange passages for preservation or study, every other ancient coffin could be shifted, however carefully, with modern equipment. But this one sarcophagus resists all force. Teams using hydraulic lifts and reinforced straps have attempted to raise it just an inch from its stone bed, only to report the same eerie result. The machinery strains, the straps grow taut, but the sarcophagus does not budge. It is as if it is not merely resting on the earth, but fused with the very bedrock of Rome itself. The first, most logical theory is a geological one. Perhaps the sarcophagus was placed centuries ago over a subtle fissure. Over time, mineral-rich water seeped up, depositing layer after layer of calcite or another cement-like substance, effectively welding the marble box to the limestone floor in a hidden, stony embrace. Another possibility is that it is not hollow at all. Could it be a solid block, a decoy filled with rubble or even poured lead, placed to mislead grave robbers from the real, more accessible tomb of a wealthy patron? Yet, even a solid block of marble of that size has a calculable weight, one that modern machinery should be able to overcome. This is where the mystery deepens into the realm of faith and folklore. Local tradition offers a different explanation, one that has made authorities deeply reluctant to take more aggressive measures. The story says this is the tomb of an early martyr, a saint whose remains were laid to rest with such powerful sanctity that the sarcophagus itself became sealed by divine will. To force it open would be an act of profound sacrilege, tempting a curse or inviting misfortune. This belief is not officially endorsed by the Church, but it carries a weight of its own, a cultural gravity that has stayed the hand of scientists and custodians alike. So the sarcophagus sits, an immovable question mark in the dark. What could possibly be inside that justifies such a permanent, mysterious seal? The pragmatic hope is for a historical treasure trove. Perhaps the perfectly preserved, identifiable remains of a major saint, accompanied by scrolls or artifacts from the first centuries of Christianity. Such a find would be unprecedented, but there is a more unsettling possibility. What if it contains nothing at all? An empty sarcophagus sealed with such finality could be a powerful theological statement, a symbol of the resurrection, a literal empty tomb proclaiming that the occupant has risen. Or more darkly, it could be a monument to a profound loss, a body stolen or destroyed so completely that the sealed stone became a memorial to absence itself. The reluctance to open it is understandable. If it holds a saint, forcing it violates reverence. If it holds nothing, forcing it shatters a mystery that has endured for 1500 years, leaving only dust and disappointment in its place. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay shut. This plain box challenges our modern insistence that every secret must be uncovered, reminding us that some burdens from the past are not meant to be lifted. The weight of an immovable sarcophagus speaks of permanence, but in another Czech ossuary, the dead were arranged with a precision that feels almost mathematical. Beneath the streets of Brno, in a space rediscovered only in 2001, archaeologists uncovered a site that halted all routine excavation. In a single, low chamber, they found not a jumbled heap of bones, but a vast, intricate design. Hundreds of skeletons were laid out with deliberate care, their long bones forming neat lines that radiated outward from a central point like the spokes of a silent stone wheel. Skulls were placed at the junctions, creating a pattern of concentric circles, a perfect geometric mandala crafted from human remains. This was no practical solution for storing excess bones. The effort involved was immense, requiring someone, or more likely a team, working over many days to sort, clean, and position each femur, tibia, and skull with the focus of an artist composing a mosaic. The first, most poignant theory sees this as a grand, three-dimensional memento mori. The Latin phrase memento mori means remember you must die, and it was a central theme in medieval monastic life, intended to encourage spiritual reflection by contemplating mortality. The monks who likely created this pattern may have been engaging in the ultimate meditation. By physically ordering the chaotic remains of the anonymous dead into a perfect, symmetrical form, they were making a profound statement. They were illustrating the equality of all souls before God. In death, the pauper and the prince are indistinguishable bones. and perhaps also symbolizing the hope for divine order to be imposed upon the chaos of earthly life and death. The pattern itself, a circle radiating outward, is a near-universal symbol of unity, eternity, and the cosmos. A second, more esoteric possibility ties the arrangement to geomantic practice, an ancient form of divination or earth magic that uses patterns and alignments to channel spiritual energies. Could this chamber have been a kind of spiritual battery? The precise placement of the bones, their orientation radiating from a central point, might have been intended to focus prayer or to create a sacred space of exceptional potency, a protective circle for the souls within or a ward for the city above. The central point might mark not just a geometric origin but a spiritual focal point. Finally, the pattern could be a literal map. Some researchers see in those radiating circles and spokes a stunningly simple representation of the medieval cosmos. The central point could be the Earth, with the circles representing the concentric spheres that, according to ancient astronomy, carried the Moon, the Sun, and the planets in their orbits around us. The skulls at the intersections might signify stars. In this reading, the chamber is a planetarium built from bone, a silent assertion that even in death we are part of a vast, ordered universe. A diagram would show this clearly, a central dot, rings expanding outward, lines cutting through them like rays of light or celestial paths. So which is it? A meditation on death, a geomantic ritual, or a model of the heavens? The true answer may be all three, intertwined. The medieval mind did not separate science, art, and religion the way we do today. To create such a pattern was a spiritual act, an intellectual exercise, and an artistic endeavor all at once. The Brno ossuary pattern does not ask to be solved, but to be witnessed. It is a reminder that our ancestors did not just store their dead. They spoke with them using the only vocabulary they had left, the silent, eloquent geometry of bone. What other messages might be waiting in the dark, written in a language we have forgotten how to read? Geometric patterns in bone speak a silent language of order, but another German catacomb holds a mystery where the language is deliberately scrambled. Tucked away in an archive, a small, leather-bound ledger from the 15th century waits. Its pages are filled not with Gothic script, but with a frantic, inscrutable code. This was the personal record of a catacomb priest, a man responsible for managing burials, crypt sales, and fees in a bustling medieval town. For decades, scholars viewed it as a curious artifact, a priest's private shorthand for mundane bookkeeping. But when cryptographers finally began to crack its cipher, they realized the truth was far more intriguing. The decoded sections reveal the expected dry details: payments received for a burial niche, the cost of a perpetual candle, a fee for interring the stillborn child of a local merchant. It is the bureaucracy of death recorded line by line, yet entire pages and, crucially, the margins and in papers remain stubbornly unreadable. The priest's cipher is not a simple substitution code where one letter stands for another. It is a complex personal system, likely blending Latin abbreviations, local dialect, invented symbols, and numerical shifts. He crafted a lock for his thoughts, and we have only found a few of the keys. So what secrets did this priest feel compelled to encrypt so fiercely? The first and most dramatic theory suggests these pages are a hidden registry of heretics. During times of religious persecution, providing Christian burial to someone condemned by the church was a serious crime. If a sympathetic priest secretly interred a supposed heretic or an excommunicated noble in his catacombs, he could not record that name openly. The coded ledger would be a clandestine roll call of souls he helped save from damnation in the eyes of the law, a secret list of mercy written between the lines of ordinary business. A second, more pragmatic idea points to hidden wealth. The catacombs were not just spiritual spaces, they were financial enterprises. A priest might have received special, unofficial donations, bribes for the best burial spots, or payments to secretly inter valuable grave goods like jewelry or saintly relics with a body. These side transactions off the official books would need to be recorded somewhere, but in a way that would not incriminate him or tempt thieves. The code could be a ledger within a ledger, a record of hidden treasures whose locations are described in cryptic terms. Perhaps the most human possibility is that these pages are simply his private diary. Imagine the emotional burden of this man's daily life. He consoled grieving families, handled decaying remains, and preached hope amid the constant presence of mortality. Where could he confess his own doubts, his frustrations with the bishop, his personal grief, or even a forbidden intellectual interest in alchemy or astronomy? The code provided a confessional of paper, a space for his inner life where no one, not even his bishop, could eavesdrop. The effort to break the remaining code is a slow, painstaking science called historical cryptanalysis. Experts are not just looking for patterns, they are building a psychological profile of the priest. They study his handwriting for stress, analyze the ink composition to see if the coded entries were made at different times, and cross-reference the deciphered names with town records to understand his network. They use statistical analysis on the symbols, searching for the frequency patterns of the German language, and try to match unique symbols to common Latin liturgical terms he would have known by heart. It is detective work across 6 centuries. Each new word decoded is a victory, but the core of the mystery persists. The ledger's true power lies in that tension between the mundane and the secret. One page calmly notes the price of a burial shroud, while the next is a wall of impenetrable symbols. This priest walked in 2 worlds, the public, orderly world of church doctrine and burial rites, and a private, hidden world of thoughts he dared not share. His code is a testament to the human need for a secret self, a reminder that even a man of God, surrounded by the dead, had thoughts he could only trust to cipher and silence. What private burdens did he lay to rest in those encrypted lines? A priest's encrypted diary hints at secrets kept from the world above, but in the Paris catacombs, an entire hidden world was built for pleasure, not penance. In 2004, police conducting a routine patrol in a restricted, unmapped section made a discovery that seemed to defy all logic. Behind a false wall of rubble, they entered a vast, carved-out chamber. And there, in the absolute silence 200 feet below the city streets, was a fully functional cinema. A large screen was mounted on the stone wall. A projector sat on a plinth wired to a car battery. Dozens of folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, but the surprises did not end there. Further exploration revealed a second chamber, this one outfitted as a restaurant and bar. A heavy granite table was set for a meal. A pressure cooker and a small stove sat nearby. Shelves carved into the rock walls held bottles of wine, whiskey, and canned food. There was even a phone line, expertly tapped into the city's underground cables, and a professional-grade alarm system to warn of intruders. This was not a crude hideout. It was an underground speakeasy, a monument to audacious secrecy. The immediate question was staggering. How the entrance to this area was a single, narrow hole in the ground, hidden in a forest on the city's outskirts. Every single item, the projector, the chairs, the bottles of wine, the granite table weighing hundreds of pounds, had to be smuggled down in pieces through miles of treacherous, pitch-black tunnels by hand. This was a logistics operation rivaling a military campaign, carried out in total darkness and silence over months, perhaps years, by a dedicated group of urban explorers known as cataphiles. Their motivation is the heart of the modern legend. Police suspected it was simply an elaborate clubhouse for secret parties, a place to escape the city completely. Yet the care and artistry suggest something deeper. For cataphiles, the forbidden zones of the catacombs are not a tomb but a frontier. Building a cinema, there is the ultimate act of reclamation, transforming a place of death into a space for community, film, and conversation. It is a direct physical rebellion against the sterile, controlled world above. The purpose of the phone line adds another layer of intrigue. Was it merely for practical communication, or did it allow this hidden society to remain connected to the internet, to curate film playlists, or even live stream from the depths? The police, of course, dismantled the installation, pouring concrete to seal the chambers. But this act of enforcement only fueled the legend. If there was one fully equipped cinema and restaurant, how many others exist still undiscovered? The catacombs stretch for over 200 miles. Authorities have catalogued only a fraction of that network. The rest is a blank map, a darkness where anything could be built. This modern mystery proves the catacombs are not a closed chapter of history. They are a living, breathing secret, a canvas for a new kind of underground culture. It asks us who truly owns these spaces, the government that seals them, or the people who, century after century, are drawn to their silence and freedom and leave their own strange marks upon the stone. The modern cinema beneath Paris shows how catacombs can be reshaped by human hands, but in the vast darkness of Odessa, some explorers swear the tunnels reshape themselves. This is the unsettling legend of the shifting walls. Experienced cataphiles, armed with detailed maps, compasses, and string, tell consistent stories of navigating a familiar corridor only to find it ending in a solid wall of rubble where none existed before. On another expedition, they might take a left turn they have taken a dozen times, only to emerge into a cavernous, dripping hall they have never seen, its ceiling hung with strange mineral formations. The most chilling accounts involve markings. A team, fearing they are lost, will use chalk or spray paint to draw a large, unmistakable arrow on a tunnel wall. They will walk forward for 20 minutes, realize they are going in a circle, and turn back to find their starting point. But when they return, the arrow is gone. The wall is bare, or worse, the arrow is there but pointing in the opposite direction. These are not the stories of novices. They come from seasoned veterans of the underground, and their consistency gives the mystery a disturbing weight. The first and most likely explanation is a geological one. The Odessa catacombs are notoriously unstable. They are not built but mined, leaving behind a honeycomb of soft limestone. Subsidence is constant. A ceiling can silently collapse overnight, filling a passage with tons of debris and creating a new, impassable dead end. Conversely, the slow erosion of a thin wall by groundwater might open a connection between two previously separate tunnels, creating a new route that feels impossibly unfamiliar. The landscape itself is in a slow, perpetual state of collapse and reconfiguration. The second factor is profoundly human: extreme sensory deprivation and psychological stress. In the absolute blackness, with only a headlamp's narrow beam, your world shrinks to a circle of stone 3 feet wide. Every tunnel looks identical: the same rough, pale walls, the same dusty floor, the same echoing silence. Without wide, stable landmarks, the human brain struggles to create a reliable mental map. It is called spatial disorientation, and in an environment this monotonous, it can be absolute. You become convinced you are walking north, when in fact you have been curving gently east for an hour. The mind, desperate for logic, can then manufacture impossible explanations for its own error. That missing chalk arrow, you may have simply marked a different, identical-looking junction 50 yards back and not realized it in the featureless gloom. The brain, not the walls, is the trickster, yet the stories persist and they fuel a darker, more tantalizing theory. During the war, the partisans were masters of deception. They built false walls to conceal bunkers, created hidden trapdoors, and engineered entire sections of tunnel that could be collapsed to trap pursuers. Could some of these ancient, forgotten mechanisms still be in place? A wall that appears solid might be a cleverly balanced slab of stone, pivoting on a central axis with enough pressure applied. A passage might be designed to be opened only from one side. Explorers may be stumbling upon the decaying engineering of a guerrilla war, a labyrinth within a labyrinth built to confuse invaders, now confusing everyone. So, are the walls of Odessa truly shifting? The answer is probably a fusion of all three possibilities. The geology provides the physical change, the psychology provides the perception of impossibility, and the history provides the blueprint for genuine man-made secrets. Together, they create a perfect storm of mystery. To walk those tunnels is to accept that the map is never complete, that the ground beneath your feet is not solid, and that in the oldest labyrinths, the only constant is change itself. The shifting geology of Odessa speaks to a landscape in flux, but beneath Rome, the very foundations of faith were once contested in the dark. A few hundred meters from the heart of the Vatican, in the depths of the Catacombs of St. Priscilla, archaeologists made a discovery that seemed to rewrite the sacred map. They uncovered a perfectly preserved Mithraic altar carved with the iconic scene of the god Mithras slaying a sacred bull. This was not just any pagan artifact. It was found in a chamber that was later clearly converted into an early Christian burial chapel. The walls above it were painted with frescoes of the Good Shepherd and Christian prayers. This is not an isolated find. Similar altars and Mithraic symbols have been found incorporated into the fabric of other catacombs, like those of St. Sebastian. The proximity is shocking. Here, literally in the shadow of St. Peter's Basilica, the two most powerful rival faiths of the late Roman Empire appear to have occupied the same underground real estate. The god Mithras was the central figure of a wildly popular mystery cult among Roman soldiers and officials. His worship involved secret initiation rites in underground temples called Mithraea, which were often built in natural caves or man-made chambers to mimic the cave where Mithras was said to have slain the bull, an act that brought forth life. The parallels to Christianity were stark enough to cause friction. Both faiths promised salvation, featured a ritual meal, and celebrated a birth around the winter solstice. They were competing for the very same souls, so what does this altar, literally built over by Christians, actually mean? The evidence points to a deliberate, strategic appropriation. One compelling theory is practical real estate. The early Christian community in Rome was often poor and persecuted. They needed discreet, underground spaces to bury their dead and worship in safety. Abandoned or little-used Mithraea, already designed as subterranean sanctuaries, would have been perfect, ready-made foundations. Taking over a rival's temple was also a powerful symbolic victory. By building their tombs and painting their symbols directly over the altar of Mithras, Christians were making a bold statement. They were declaring their God had conquered the old gods, that the new covenant had superseded the old mysteries. It was a spiritual conquest carved in stone and plaster, but a second, more nuanced possibility exists. Could there have been a period of overlap, even syncretism? Imagine a time in the 3rd century when religious identities were fluid. A family might have had a son in the army who was initiated into Mithraism and a daughter who converted to Christianity. The underground space, perhaps originally a private burial chamber on family land, might have been used for both traditions, either simultaneously or in quick succession, reflecting a household in spiritual transition. The Christian frescoes were not defacing the Mithraic altar in this view, but quietly dialoguing with it, layering a new truth over an old one. The imagery itself invites comparison. Mithras slays a bull to release life-giving blood. Christ, the Lamb of God, sacrifices himself to release salvific blood. The visual echo is too strong to ignore. Early Christian theologians were acutely aware of these parallels and often framed their faith as the fulfillment of what paganism had only glimpsed. By placing their worship directly atop a Mithraeum, they were physically enacting that theology. They were saying the symbol had found its true meaning, the shadow had met its substance. This hidden architectural war reveals a crucial truth about the spread of Christianity. It was not a clean, instantaneous replacement. It was a messy, street-level struggle for spaces both physical and spiritual. The catacombs show us this battle frozen in time, where the paint of the resurrection still drips over the carved blood of the bull. What other victories and compromises are cemented into the bedrock, waiting for a trowel to reveal them? That physical conquest of one faith over another reshaped the very stone, but in other tombs, the light itself was meant to last forever. Deep within the Rabat catacombs on the island of Malta, the air is still and cool. Carved from the soft Globigerina limestone, these tunnels served as a sacred burial ground for over 500 years. If you look closely at the edges of some burial niches, you can see them, dark, greasy smudges of ancient soot staining the pale yellow rock, often positioned just above a small, carved shelf or a hole that once held a clay or metal lamp. This was a common, deeply human practice across the ancient Mediterranean. When a loved one was laid to rest in the dark, the living would place a small oil lamp in the niche. It served a practical purpose to light the way for visitors paying their respects, but its symbolic meaning was far more profound. That fragile, flickering flame was a poignant stand against the finality of the grave. It represented the enduring soul, a beacon of memory, and a hope that the deceased was not lost in eternal darkness. For as long as the lamp burned, a thread of light connected the world of the living to the realm of the dead. Yet Maltese folklore whispers of something extraordinary. Among the thousands of ordinary lamps, a select few were said to be different. These were the lampegir Tartagem, the eternal lamps. Legends passed down for generations describe these lights as burning with a soft, steady glow, never flickering, never needing oil replenished, guarding their assigned tombs for centuries. The stories are specific. They often involve a lamp placed in the tomb of a particularly holy person, a saintly bishop, a revered hermit, or a martyr. The flame was a testament to their sanctity, a divine seal on their resting place. So what could explain a legend of perpetual light in a sealed catacomb? The first and most enchanting possibility is a natural one, bioluminescence. Certain species of fungi, like the honey mushroom or foxfire, emit a faint greenish glow as they digest decaying wood. If the wooden supports or burial biers in a niche began to rot and the right spores were present, a patch of this ghostly light could indeed appear. To a medieval visitor entering the absolute blackness of the catacomb with only a torch, the sight of a soft, eerie glow emanating from a saint's tomb would be miraculous. It would not look like fire, but like a cold, celestial radiance, a perfect symbol of an eternal soul. The light would last as long as the organic matter lasted, perhaps for years, before fading away, leaving behind only the legend of the lamp that needed no oil. A second explanation looks to ancient technology. Could there have been a forgotten recipe for a fuel that burned exceptionally slowly? The classical world knew of complex oils and waxes. The famous eternal flame in the Temple of Vesta in Rome was maintained by priestesses, but it required constant care and fuel. However, some ancient sources, like the writings of Plutarch, describe lamps in certain tombs that burned for incredibly long durations. While likely exaggerated, this hints at a pursuit of long-lasting fuels, perhaps using thickened oils or specific wick materials that allowed a tiny, sustained glow for months or even a few years, long enough to seem supernatural to subsequent generations who discovered them still faintly alight. The most compelling interpretation, however, may be metaphorical. The idea of an eternal flame is one of humanity's most powerful and recurring symbols. It appears in Zoroastrian temples, Jewish menorahs, and Olympic ceremonies. In a Christian catacomb context, the eternal lamp would not be a physical object, but a spiritual metaphor for the undying soul and the promise of resurrection. The folklore might then be a beautiful misunderstanding, a literal interpretation of a spiritual truth. A later visitor, seeing the soot mark and hearing the story of the holy person buried there, might simply assume a miraculous lamp had once burned in that very spot, giving physical form to a doctrine of eternal light. The true mystery of Rabat is not about a lost battery or glowing fungus. It is about the human need to defy the dark. In those silent corridors, a simple clay lamp was more than a tool. It was a statement of love, faith, and defiance. The legend of the eternal lamp takes that desperate, beautiful hope and stretches it to its logical, miraculous conclusion. What if the light never went out? What if memory could truly be made everlasting? The soot stains on the wall are real. The stories are vivid. Between them lies a space where history and hope intertwine, illuminated by a flame that may have never needed a wick to burn. That eternal flame represents a hope for light, but some faces were sealed in darkness forever. Among the neatly stacked bones of a Central European ossuary, perhaps in the Czech Republic or southern Poland, a 19th century caretaker made a chilling find. One skull, resting among countless anonymous others, was not bare. A simple, hammered sheet of iron was fused tightly over its face, covering the eyes, nose, and mouth, leaving only the jawbone exposed. It was not a crafted death mask with features, but a crude, blank plate riveted or corroded onto the bone itself. The immediate, visceral question is why? Why would someone go to such lengths to cover a face for eternity? The theories are as dark as the metal itself. The first and most grim possibility is punishment. In medieval Europe, a form of posthumous execution called damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory, could be inflicted on traitors, heretics, or notorious criminals. Their bodies were often desecrated or displayed shamefully. Could the iron mask be a variation of this? It might signify that the person was forbidden from looking upon God's light in the afterlife, or that their face was too shameful to be seen by the righteous dead surrounding them. The mask becomes a permanent blindfold and gag, a final sentence carried beyond the grave. A second, more compassionate explanation points to disease, specifically leprosy or a severe facial deformity. In a time of profound fear and misunderstanding, physical disfigurement was often seen as a mark of sin or divine punishment. To conceal a ravaged face with a smooth metal plate might have been an act of mercy by loved ones, a way to restore dignity in death and perhaps, in their belief, to present a whole face before God on Judgment Day. It could also have been born of superstition, an attempt to contain the perceived corruption or contagion of the disease within the coffin. A third idea casts the individual as a warrior. Could this be the remnant of a battlefield burial? A soldier wearing a simple nasal helmet or a face covering male coif might have been interred in his armor. Over centuries, the leather and fabric rotted away, leaving only the iron components fused to the skull by corrosion. What we see as a mask might simply be the last piece of a warrior's kit forgotten by time. But the most haunting theory is purely ritualistic. Folklore across many cultures speaks of fears that the dead might return or that their spirit could escape through the senses. Covering the eyes could prevent the corpse from seeing its way back to the living world. Sealing the mouth might stop it from speaking curses or calling out names. The blank iron plate, then, is not a punishment but a containment seal, a cold, physical ward against a restless soul. Solving this mystery hits a profound scientific wall, the difficulty of dating. The bone itself can be radiocarbon dated, giving a range for when the person died, but the iron mask is another story. Iron does not contain organic material for carbon dating. Experts must rely on metallurgical analysis studying the composition of the metal, its impurities, and the smithing techniques to estimate its age. The results are often frustratingly broad, spanning centuries. So we are left with a jarring disconnect. The skeleton might be from the 12th century, but the mask could be from the 15th. This opens even stranger possibilities. Was the mask added decades or even centuries after the burial? If so, why would someone later open an old tomb to perform this eerie act? Perhaps the burial was disturbed and the mask was placed by superstitious workers who felt the need to re-secure the remains. Or maybe the legend of a restless ghost attached itself to that particular skull, and a later generation took matters into their own hands. The skeleton with the iron mask offers no answers, only a silent, metallic stare. It forces us to confront the medieval mind's tangible relationship with death, where metaphysical fears required physical solutions. This was not about symbolism alone. It was about the weight of iron on bone, a final, heavy attempt to solve a problem we can no longer name. That iron mask sought to silence a face for eternity, but on the walls of another Roman catacomb, someone tried to make the silence sing. In the labyrinth of Saints Marcellinus and Peter, amidst the fading frescoes of saints and lambs, you can find something easily missed, faint, delicate scratches on the stone. They are not pictures or words, but a series of small, cryptic marks, curving lines, dots, and tiny hooks, often hovering just above lines of carved Latin text. To most visitors, they look like random damage or the idle scribbles of a long-ago hand. But to a small group of dedicated scholars, these marks are a potential treasure. They believe these are neumes, the earliest form of written musical notation in medieval Europe, and they may hold the melody to funeral chants sung here 1700 years ago. The mystery is tantalizing. If these marks truly are neumes, and if they can be accurately decoded, we would not just read about early Christian burial rites, we could hear them. We could reconstruct the actual songs of grief and hope that echoed through these tunnels as families laid their loved ones to rest. The air in these catacombs, which has been silent for over a millennium, could once again carry a human melody. This is not like finding a sheet of modern music. Neumes are famously, frustratingly ambiguous. Developed before the modern five-line staff, they are essentially a memory aid. A rising squiggle might tell the singer to go up in pitch, but not by how much. A dot might indicate a short note or a pause. The precise intervals, the rhythm, the tempo, all of that was passed down orally from teacher to student and is now lost. These wall scratches are a skeleton of a song, lacking the flesh and breath of tradition. The work to solve this is painstaking archaeology meets forensic musicology. Teams use advanced spectral imaging to photograph the walls under different light wavelengths, trying to lift these faint marks from the stone like invisible ink. Each symbol is catalogued, its position relative to the text scrupulously noted. The next step is the great interpretive leap. Scholars must compare these catacomb neumes to the few surviving examples from later manuscripts, searching for patterns. They must understand the Latin text they accompany. Are these psalms of mourning or hymns of resurrection? The meaning of the words can suggest a musical mood, whether the melody should be a somber dirge or a more hopeful, rising line. Imagine the potential of a breakthrough. For centuries, we have studied early Christianity through its texts, its art, and its architecture. We know what they wrote, what they painted, and where they worshipped. But music is the most intimate and ephemeral of arts. It exists only in the moment it is performed. It is the sound of collective emotion. To recover a melody from these walls would be to recover a feeling. We would hear the communal voice of a persecuted faith, not in theological debate, but in raw, melodic prayer. It would add a profound new dimension to our understanding of the past, transforming these silent corridors from a visual museum into an acoustic one. Yet the caution is severe. Could these marks be something else entirely? Some archaeologists argue they might be mason's marks, indicating how a stone should be cut, or simple decorative flourishes with no musical intent. The line between a purposeful neume and a random scratch is terrifyingly thin. Even if they are musical, the gap between interpretation and certainty is vast. Two scholars looking at the same squiggle might hear entirely different notes in their minds. Any reconstruction would be an educated guess, a duet between a medieval scribe and a modern professor, separated by a chasm of silent centuries. So, can we ever truly hear the songs of the dead? Perhaps not with perfect historical fidelity, but the very attempt is a powerful act of listening. It represents our deep desire to reconnect with the past, not as a static artifact, but as a living, breathing experience. Those faint marks on the wall are a whisper. They suggest that in this place of eternal rest, the living once raised their voices in a song meant to bridge heaven and earth. The greatest mystery may be whether we, centuries later, can learn to sing along. The silent songs of Rome are a world away from the echoing, damp chill of Edinburgh's old town. Beneath the South Bridge, a massive 18th century structure built to span the city's steep valleys, lies a different kind of underworld. These are the Edinburgh Vaults, a series of cavernous stone chambers never meant for the dead, but for the living poor workshops, taverns, and homes that were quickly abandoned to darkness and damp. Today, they hold a mystery that trickles through the stone. In the deepest, most sealed-off sections where no modern pipe should reach, investigators and tour guides have consistently reported the same phenomenon, the clear, unmistakable sound of flowing water. It is not a drip or a leak, but the gentle, continuous murmur of a stream or a spring, echoing as if through a subterranean channel. The source of this water has never been found. The first theory is geological. Edinburgh is a city built upon dramatic ridges and lost waterways. Before the bridge was constructed, a large, foul body of water called the Norloch filled the valley to the north. It was drained in the 18th century, but folklore insists its waters did not simply vanish. They seeped downward, joining hidden underground streams that have flowed beneath the city for centuries. The sound in the vaults could be one of these forgotten currents, a ghost river still running its ancient course, now audible only in the man-made cavities that intersect its path. It is a natural phenomenon, but one that feels unnervingly purposeful in the absolute dark. A second, more prosaic explanation points to human error. The South Bridge was a feat of hurried engineering. Its vaults were crammed with a chaotic web of early sewage lines, water pipes, and drainage culverts, poorly documented even at the time. A breach in one of these antique systems, perhaps a cracked clay pipe from the 1780s, could allow a steady trickle to escape into a void between walls, creating the illusion of a natural spring. The water would be real, but its origin would be tragically mundane, a legacy of crumbling infrastructure. Yet, in a place as layered with story as Edinburgh, the supernatural explanation is never far behind. The vaults are infamous as one of the most haunted locations in the world, with countless reports of shadow figures, oppressive cold spots, and feelings of being watched. The unexplained water sound is often woven directly into these ghost stories. Paranormal investigators suggest that running water is sometimes recorded as a trigger for psychic phenomena, a conductor for emotional energy. Could the sound be an auditory echo of the vault's grim past? When these chambers were sealed, they trapped within them the misery of poverty, disease, and crime. The flowing water, with no physical source, becomes a metaphor for time itself, or for the tears of those who suffered there, a haunting that appeals directly to the senses, making the past feel chillingly, damply present. The true power of this mystery lies in its simplicity. In the catacombs of Rome or Paris, we expect grand symbols and hidden tombs, but in the utilitarian vaults of Edinburgh, the enigma is elemental. It is just water, the most common substance on Earth, appearing where it should not be. This makes it far more unsettling. You cannot dismiss it as an odd carving or a trick of the light. It is a sound you can close your eyes and hear, a tangible proof that the world beneath our feet is not solid, but alive with hidden currents. It reminds us that even in our most constructed environments, ancient nature finds a way to whisper its presence, carrying with it the chill of forgotten depths and the stories they still hold. Water flows where logic says it should not, but in another crypt, bones tell a story medicine cannot yet decipher. Beneath the quiet grounds of London's historic Charterhouse, once a monastery and later a refuge, archaeologists uncovered a mass grave unlike any other. It was a plague pit from the Black Death's darkest days in the 1300s, a time when carts piled high with bodies were a common sight. Among the jumbled remains of countless victims, a pattern emerged that stopped researchers cold. A significant cluster of skeletons, both male and female and of varying ages, shared the exact same peculiar deformity. It was a specific, abnormal growth on the long bones of the legs, a bony spur or lesion that had formed during life. This was not the telltale pitting or damage caused by the bubonic plague bacterium. It was something else entirely, a silent signature of another suffering that walked hand in hand with the pandemic. The immediate question was stark. What could cause a group of people, all dying around the same horrific moment in history, to carry this identical physical mark? The first theory points to a local environmental poison. Perhaps these individuals all lived or worked in a specific area of medieval London with contaminated water or soil. Heavy metals like lead leaching from glazed pottery or piping, or industrial toxins from early tanning or metalworking could, over years, cause skeletal changes. But for the deformity to be so consistent across different individuals, the source would have had to be exceptionally potent and widespread, a toxic shadow over one neighborhood. A second, more intimate possibility is genetics. This might have been an extended family group, all living together in a crowded tenement. They could have shared a hereditary condition, a genetic disorder that manifested in this specific bone abnormality. When the plague swept through their home, it claimed them all at once, burying their shared biological secret in a communal grave. Their bone deformity was not related to the plague at all, but a family trait that became visible to us only because tragedy struck them together. The most unsettling idea, however, is that this marks evidence of a co-occurring disease. The Black Death did not travel alone. Malnutrition, respiratory infections, and other illnesses would have ravaged populations already weakened by fear and social collapse. Could this bone lesion be the trace of a separate, unknown epidemic that spread concurrently with the plague? A viral or bacterial infection that modern science has never categorized, one that left its calling card on the skeleton before its victims succumbed to the more famous killer. Solving this is the work of bioarchaeologists who are now using tools the original grave diggers could never have conceived. They are extracting ancient DNA from the teeth and petrous bones of these very skeletons. The process is delicate, a race against time and contamination. In sterile labs, they are not just looking for the DNA of Yersinia pestis, the plague bacterium. They are sequencing the entire genetic blueprint of these individuals, searching for two things. First, they look for shared genetic markers among the deformed skeletons, which would strongly point to a familial link. Second, and more revolutionary, they are performing what is called pathogen screening. They sift through all the genetic material recovered, searching for the faint, fragmented signatures of other microorganisms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, that may have infected these people. They are, in essence, performing an autopsy 7 centuries after death, searching for a culprit that left only a bone-deep clue. This mystery transcends a simple medical curiosity. It forces us to see the Black Death not as a single, monolithic horror, but as a complex catastrophe. In the chaos of the pandemic, other sufferings were swallowed by the larger shadow. This cluster of abnormal bones is a whisper from those forgotten afflictions. It reminds us that history's greatest tragedies are often layers of disaster, and that the stories of the past are still written in the very marrow of the lost. The silent signatures of disease are a world away from the guardians of myth. In the ancient crypts beneath Clermont-Ferrand, France, visitors do not find strange bone growths, but something that moves. For generations, locals have whispered of the shadow hounds. These are not the scratch of a real animal's paws on stone. They are large, indistinct canine shapes, darker than the surrounding gloom, seen from the corner of the eye, standing sentinel at archways or lying across sealed tomb entrances. They are watchers in the dark, and the moment you turn to look directly, they dissolve into the shifting shadows from which they came. These persistent apparitions are not unique to this one French town. They tap directly into one of Europe's oldest and most widespread supernatural traditions, the Church Grimm. Across Britain and Scandinavia, folklore tells of a guardian spirit, often taking the form of a large black dog that was bound to protect a churchyard or sacred site. The origins of this myth are as chilling as the spectre itself. One ancient practice believed that to ensure a new church's foundation was strong and its grounds protected from evil, a living creature, often a dog, would be walled up alive within the cornerstone, its spirit forever tethered to the place as a guardian. The shadow hounds of Clermont-Ferrand and could be echoes of this brutal, forgotten rite. Their spectral forms a permanent imprint of that sacrifice, but could there be a less supernatural explanation? The theory of residual energy offers a fascinating alternative. Imagine, centuries ago, a real mastiff or wolfhound kept by the monks or caretakers to patrol these very crypts against grave robbers. This loyal animal would walk the same routes day after day, year after year, its presence a constant in the silent underground. Parapsychologists suggest that intense, repetitive emotional energy, like the focused vigilance of a guard dog, can sometimes impress itself upon a location, replaying like a psychic recording. What people see may not be a ghost with intent, but a snapshot of pure instinct, a loop of ancient duty still playing out in the stone. A more psychological interpretation sees them as protective projections of our own minds. Entering a crypt is a primal act. We descend into a space dedicated to death, a realm of silence and finality. Our subconscious, seeking a sense of security, might conjure a familiar guardian figure at the threshold. The dog, humanity's oldest companion and protector, becomes the perfect symbol. These shadow hounds are not invaders from the crypt, but mental sentinels we unconsciously post at the door, a defense against the deep, innate unease of trespassing in the realm of the dead. To bring this legend to life, picture a dramatic reenactment. A lone filmmaker, seeking the authentic atmosphere of the crypts at night, sets up a camera on a tripod at the end of a long, barrel-vaulted corridor. The only light is the dim red glow of his recording equipment. He walks away, leaving the camera to capture the empty passage in time lapse over hours. When he reviews the footage the next day, fast-forwarding through the stillness, he sees it. For just 3 frames, a solid, canine-shaped patch of darkness detaches itself from the deeper shadow of an archway. It takes 2 steps forward into the faint light, pauses as if lifting its head, and then melts backward into nothingness. It is there, and then it is not. No sound, no growl, just a silent patrol captured by a machine, a guardian caught in the act of watching over its eternal post. Whether psychic scar, mental safeguard, or myth made manifest, the shadow hounds fulfill a profound human need. They give form to the idea that sacred spaces, even those of silence and decay, are not abandoned. They are watched over. In the absolute dark, the mind, the stone, or perhaps history itself provides a sentry, ensuring that some doors, real or symbolic, are never truly left unguarded. Guarding dogs and silent crypts are one thing, but what if the catacombs held a workshop dedicated to bending nature's very laws? Prague, a city of 100 spires and 1,000 legends, whispers of a chamber where the line between science and magic was deliberately blurred. The story goes that deep beneath the winding streets of the old town, near the ancient Jewish quarter, a network of forgotten cellars conceals a perfectly preserved alchemical laboratory. It is said to be frozen in time, as if the practitioner just stepped away. A cold furnace sits against a wall, its bricks stained with soot and strange residues. Tables are crowded with the delicate tools of the quest, glass retorts and beakers, their interiors clouded with the ghosts of long-evaporated elixirs, mortars and pestles caked with colorful, powdered minerals, and crucibles where metals once swam in liquid fire. Most tantalizing of all are the rumored manuscripts, books bound in cracked leather, their pages filled not with plain text but with the cryptic symbols, coded diagrams, and allegorical illustrations that were the secret language of alchemy. This legend is inextricably tied to one of history's most enigmatic rulers, Emperor Rudolf II. In the late 1500s, Rudolf moved his imperial court to Prague Castle, and he brought with him not just political power, but a profound obsession with the occult and the hidden sciences. He was less interested in governing than in collecting not just art but minds. His court became a magnet for astronomers like Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler, but also for a dazzling array of mystics, magicians, and alchemists. Men like John Dee and Edward Kelly promised they could commune with angels and decipher the language of creation itself. For these thinkers, alchemy was not merely about turning lead into gold, though that was a potent symbol. It was a spiritual and philosophical pursuit, a search for the philosopher's stone that could purify base matter, heal all illness, and grant immortality. It was the ultimate mystery, and Rudolf funded their work from chambers within the castle itself. The legend of the underground workshop suggests that some of this work retreated even deeper into the city's foundational stone, perhaps for secrecy, for the stable temperatures needed for delicate experiments, or to be closer to the elemental earth. So, does this hidden chamber exist as a single, discoverable room? The historical reality is likely more fragmented, yet no less fascinating. Prague's underground is a warren of medieval cellars, storage vaults, and genuine old alchemical workshops, many of which have been discovered and restored over the years. The Speculum Alchemiae Museum, for instance, is built into a basement that historical records confirm was used by Rudolf's alchemists. The pervasive legend of the one perfect lost lab is probably a conflation, a merging of all these real sites into one mythical, ultimate location in the public imagination. It is a folklore born from the city's very atmosphere. When you walk the crooked lanes of the old town, past houses bearing alchemical symbols on their facades, you feel the weight of that history. The legend satisfies a deep desire to believe that Rudolf's grand, mystical project did not entirely vanish, that its physical heart still beats somewhere in the dark, waiting to reveal its secrets. This leads to the most compelling question of all. If such a workshop were found, what would its greatest treasure be? Not a lump of manufactured gold, but those coded manuscripts. To an alchemist, the written work was the true gold. Their texts were deliberately obscure, written in layers of allegory where a recipe for a chemical process also described a journey of spiritual purification. A drawing of a king and queen in union might symbolize the combining of sulfur and mercury. Decoding these books would be a monumental task, not of chemistry alone, but of symbolic interpretation. They would offer an unfiltered window into a world, where the material and the spiritual were fused, where every experiment in the furnace was also a prayer for transformation. The dust-covered workshop, then, is more than a historical curiosity. It represents the human hunger for ultimate knowledge, a hunger so powerful we imagine it preserved in perpetuity, its tools still ready, its final answer still hovering just out of reach in the cool, still air beneath the cobblestones. The dust of an alchemist's dream is one kind of residue, but in Rome, a different kind of residue tells a story of a task left forever unfinished. In the Catacombs of Domitilla, archaeologists cleared the debris from a standard burial niche, a loculus, expecting to find the quiet finality of a sealed tomb. Instead, they uncovered a scene of startling suspension. A skeleton lay within the shallow shelf, but the large terracotta tile meant to seal it in was only loosely propped in the opening. A trowel crusted with dried mortar lay discarded on the floor. Beside it sat a small, intact oil lamp, its wick charred from recent use. A single bronze coin gleamed in the dust a few feet away. This was not a burial. This was a burial interrupted, a moment frozen under the weight of centuries. The scene reconstructs itself with eerie clarity. A small funeral party, perhaps family members and a hired mason, had descended into the catacombs to inter a loved one. The body was placed in the niche. The lamp was lit to push back the overwhelming dark and to symbolize the soul. The mason began his work, mixing his mortar and setting the first part of the ceiling tile. Then something happened. He dropped his trowel. The mourners set down the lamp and perhaps the coin, meant as Charon's obol to pay the ferryman across the river Styx. They left everything exactly as it was and fled, never to return. The question hangs in the still air of that corridor. What could have been so urgent, so terrifying, that they would abandon a sacred duty mid-performance? The artifacts are silent witnesses, but they offer clues. The lamp is key. Its presence confirms the work was being done at night or in the pitch-black tunnels, and its single, charred wick suggests it had not been burning for long. This was not a planned pause, it was a sudden flight. The coin, a standard low-denomination piece, tells us this was an ordinary family, not wealthy elites who could command immediate protection. They were vulnerable. The scattered tools indicate panic, not an orderly departure. 3 plausible scenarios emerge from the shadows. The first is violence, a sudden attack. The catacombs, while places of sanctuary, were also hiding places. Could a rival family, bandits, or even Roman authorities have raided the tunnels? The sound of approaching footsteps or distant shouts in the echoing dark would have been enough to send the party fleeing for their lives, leaving their dead behind to save the living. The second, and perhaps most historically likely, is the swift terror of a plague outbreak. If word reached the burial party that sickness was spiking above ground, that the city gates were closing or a quarantine was being enforced, their primary instinct would be to rush back to their home to protect the remaining family. The rituals of the dead would instantly become secondary to the survival of the living. A third, more subtle possibility is a sudden religious edict. During periods of persecution, an imperial decree could have abruptly forbidden Christian burial rites. A lookout might have brought word that soldiers were sweeping the area, forcing the community to scatter and conceal all activity. Each theory changes the emotional color of the moment. An attack paints it in strokes of fear and conflict. A plague suggests a desperate, tragic choice between duty and survival. A political edict implies a quieter but no less profound resignation, the recognition that faith must sometimes go underground, even leaving its dead exposed. The skeleton itself offers no further answer. It is merely the patient center of the storm, waiting for a closure that never came. This single, half-sealed niche is a puncture in time. It is not about grand history, but about a specific afternoon or evening when the mundane, sorrowful work of death was cut short. We see the masons hurriedly mixed mortar, now dry for 17 centuries. We see the lamp that cast flickering shadows on frightened faces. We see the coin that never reached the corpse's hand. In that corridor, history is not a record of what was completed, but a fragile snapshot of what was abandoned. A testament to the fact that sometimes the past does not end with a period, but with a desperate, unfinished dash into the dark. A sealed burial niche holds a moment of panic, but a nearby wall holds a puzzle of deliberate, baffling design. Carved with painstaking care into the living rock of an Italian catacomb, perhaps in Rome or Naples, is a map. It is not a simple sketch. Its lines are precise, showing intersecting passages, chambers of varying sizes, and what appear to be staircases or marked niches. To the modern explorer, it feels like a gift, a key left behind by the ancients to navigate their labyrinth. But that feeling quickly curdles into profound confusion. When you hold a modern survey of the catacombs you are standing in against this ancient carving, nothing aligns. The map on the wall depicts a network that simply does not exist in this location. It is a chart for a place that cannot be found, a guide to nowhere. The immediate practical theory is that it maps a lost extension. Catacombs were not built in a single campaign. They grew organically over centuries as a community needed more space. Teams of diggers, the fossors, would carve out new galleries branching from the main arteries. This carved map could be the architect's plan for a new wing, a projection of tunnels meant to be dug. Perhaps it was etched on the wall as a reference for the work crews, showing the intended layout of a future burial level. Then history intervened. A plague might have decimated the community, funds could have dried up, or a theological shift might have moved burial practices above ground. The ambitious expansion was abandoned, but its blueprint remained, a ghost of a catacomb that never drew breath. It is a fossilized intention, a what-if scenario etched in stone. A second, more esoteric possibility reinterprets the lines not as architecture, but as theology. Early Christian art was deeply symbolic. Could this so-called map actually be a spiritual diagram? The passages might not represent physical tunnels, but the pathways of the soul through purgation or the stages of spiritual ascent. A large central chamber might symbolize heavenly paradise, while smaller, twisting offshoots could represent earthly temptation or penance. In this reading, the map is not meant to guide your feet, but your spirit. It is a meditation aid carved in a place of death to contemplate the journey after death. This would explain why it doesn't match the physical surroundings. It was never meant to. It charts an interior, invisible landscape, making the catacomb wall a page in a sacred, three-dimensional book. Then there is the tantalizing, frustrating idea of a different network entirely. Could the map be a record of another, now completely lost catacomb complex? In cities like Rome, countless minor burial sites were forgotten, sealed by landslides or urban construction over the millennia. The mason who carved this might have been documenting a separate, private family catacomb located elsewhere in the city or its countryside. He etched it here as a permanent record, a legal deed in stone showing the family's burial holdings. If this is true, then the map is not a mystery of this place, but a clue to another. It is a signpost pointing to a hidden world that may still exist, intact and silent, beneath a modern parking lot or apartment block, its location known only by this cryptic sketch on a distant wall. For the modern cartographers who dedicate their lives to mapping these underworlds, this carving is a special kind of torment. These are men and women who use laser scanners and GPS to create millimeter-perfect three-dimensional models of every crack and curve. Their work is the science of making the unknown known, of bringing order to the chaotic dark. To then be confronted with this ancient, precise, and utterly wrong map is to face a direct challenge from the past. It mocks the very idea of a complete survey. It whispers that their perfect modern map is incomplete, that the ancients knew of passages that have since vanished or were kept secret. The frustration is palpable, but so is the intrigue. It forces them to ask humbling questions. Did the builders have knowledge of a geological fault that later collapsed, erasing an entire section? Could the map use a different scale or orientation convention we have not yet cracked? The wall holds its secret tightly, with no legend, no "you are here" marker, and no accompanying text. The carving is a closed system. It is a locked door for which we have found no key. Only the unsettling realization that those who built these silent cities may have left signs we no longer understand. It turns the catacomb from a solved puzzle into an ongoing conversation across time, where the past has drawn a map and dared us centuries later to figure out where it leads. That map to nowhere is a puzzle for the mind, but another Mediterranean legend speaks directly to the senses. In the humid dark of a Sicilian or Maltese catacomb, travelers for centuries have described a single, unadorned marble sarcophagus that seems to hold a faint, living rhythm. When the air grows perfectly still, a delicate mist begins to gather on the cool surface of its lid. It forms a thin, shimmering film, then slowly fades away, only to gather once more a few moments later. The cycle repeats with a slow, steady cadence, like the gentle rise and fall of a sleeping chest. It is the sarcophagus that breathes. The first explanations are grounded in simple, elegant physics. Picture the environment. These catacombs are carved deep into limestone, a porous stone that acts like a sponge for groundwater. The air inside is often saturated with moisture, a damp chill that seeps into your bones. The marble of the sarcophagus, however, is a dense, cold mass. When the warm, moist air from a visitor's breath or a nearby air current settles onto that cold stone surface, the water vapor in the air rapidly condenses, just like dew forming on grass at dawn. As the air currents shift minutely, that thin film of condensation might evaporate, only to reform when the conditions are just right again. This could create a pulsing effect, a visible inhale and exhale dictated by the unseen dance of temperature and humidity in the chamber. A second possibility involves hidden hydraulics. Many of these tombs are not perfectly sealed from the earth. A slow, persistent seepage of groundwater could be entering the sarcophagus through a hairline crack in its base, collecting in a shallow pool inside. As the water level very slowly rises, it compresses the air trapped within the sealed space. That pressurized air then forces its way out through another microscopic fissure in the lid, where it meets the colder surface and instantly condenses into a visible mist. When the pressure equalizes, the mist stops, then the water seeps in again, the pressure builds, and the cycle repeats, a literal, geological respiration driven by the patient drip of centuries. Yet the story persists across different islands and cultures, always attached to one particular tomb, never to all of them. This consistency adds a layer that simple condensation cannot entirely dismiss. Why this one? Folklore provides a haunting answer. This is the tomb of a saint in a state of mystical slumber, or a soul in a deep purgatorial sleep, its spiritual vitality manifesting as a physical sigh. In a place dedicated to the eternal rest of the body, the one thing that should be utterly absent is the sign of breath. Its appearance, however faint, becomes a profound violation of expectation, a whisper of life where only silence should reign. To stand before it is to experience a profound sensory contradiction. Your eyes report a phenomenon that looks undeniably organic, a pulse. Your rational mind scrambles for the physics of condensation and groundwater. And your deeper, older instincts feel the weight of the story. The true mystery may not be whether the sarcophagus breathes, but why we are so compelled to watch it, to project the most fundamental sign of life onto a vessel designed for its absolute absence. In that quiet, misty rhythm, we confront our own inability to see stone as just stone, and our eternal hope that perhaps in the deepest dark, not everything is asleep. That gentle, misty breath on stone belongs to a single tomb, but an entire city of the dead may lie hidden just across the river. Across the Tiber from the ancient heart of Rome, the Trastevere district hums with modern life, its cobblestone streets crowded with cafes and vibrant nightlife. Yet beneath this bustling neighborhood, a profound silence is rumored to hold. While the Christian catacombs are mapped and studied, whispers persist of a parallel underworld, vast, lost Jewish catacombs sealed and forgotten since the late Roman Empire. Historical clues are tantalizing but fragmented. Ancient texts like the writings of the scholar Saint Jerome mention Jewish burial places across the Tiber. Later medieval chronicles note the accidental discovery of Hebrew-inscribed tombs during construction projects, only for them to be sealed up again and their locations lost. These are not rumors of a few forgotten tunnels, but of an extensive network, a sacred counterpart to the Christian sites, preserving a community that lived and worshipped in Rome for centuries before Christianity even existed. The central, aching mystery is one of location. Where are the entrances? Over 2,000 years of relentless urban construction, from imperial forums to medieval towers to modern sewer lines, have reshaped the very ground. An entrance shaft might lie buried under 10 meters of landfill, concealed beneath the foundation of a Renaissance palazzo, or simply walled up in a cellar, its purpose forgotten. Modern archaeologists use ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive tools to listen to the earth, but Trastevere is a dense warren of ancient structures atop one another, creating a chaotic sonic picture. Finding a specific void, a staircase leading into the dark, is like searching for a single silent room in a building filled with echoing chatter. the potential insights locked within such a place are staggering. While we have inscriptions and artifacts from above ground, a sealed catacomb is a time capsule. It would hold the everyday art and symbols of a living community, not as they presented themselves to Roman society, but as they prepared for eternity. We might find frescoes depicting biblical scenes from the Hebrew Bible, but rendered in a distinctly Roman artistic style. We could uncover inscriptions in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, revealing a multilingual, integrated community. Personal items buried with the dead, cosmetic jars, toys, tools of trade would paint a vivid portrait of daily life. Most importantly, it could show us how this community maintained its identity. Did their burial art avoid human images in adherence to Jewish law, or did they adopt the Roman fashion for portrait likenesses? The catacombs would answer fundamental questions about assimilation and resistance, about how one of the ancient world's oldest diasporas navigated a dominant, powerful culture while holding fast to its faith. This leads to the delicate, modern sensitivity that surrounds the search. The quest is not merely an archaeological puzzle, it is a profound matter of religious respect and political history. Jewish law, or halakha, is very specific about the inviolability of burial sites. A grave is considered a permanent resting place, and disturbing it is a serious desecration. Any exploration would require not just permits, but the direct involvement and consent of Rome's Jewish community, who are the spiritual descendants of those who may lie buried there. The shadow of more recent history also looms large. The memory of the Holocaust, where Jewish graves across Europe were desecrated, makes the community justifiably protective of any ancestral resting place. For archaeologists and historians, the desire to learn battles with the ethical imperative to respect the dead. Furthermore, the very act of discovery could create tension. What if the catacombs extend beneath properties now owned by the church or private citizens? The question of ownership, access, and preservation becomes a legal and diplomatic minefield. It is a search that must be conducted with extreme caution, balancing a hunger for knowledge against the weight of reverence and a painful past. So the hidden catacombs of Trastevere remain a specter, a possibility that pulls at historians and yet remains respectfully out of reach. They represent a missing chapter, not just in Roman history, but in the story of the Jewish diaspora itself. To find them would be to open a door not only into the earth, but into a silent dialogue between two world faiths, frozen at a moment when their paths in the eternal city were still being carved side by side in the dark. A knight's tomb should be a monument to valor, a final salute carved in stone. But in a crusader crypt, perhaps on the sun-scorched island of Rhodes, one such slab tells a different story. The effigy shows a knight in full armor, his hands clasped in prayer, every detail meticulously rendered. Then you see his shield resting against his side. The coat of arms upon it is clear, a proud lion rampant, a symbol of courage and nobility. Yet something is profoundly wrong. In the strict, unbreakable language of heraldry, the lion is facing left instead of right, or its colors are inverted, turning gold to silver. This is not a mason's error. It is a deliberate, permanent mark of disgrace, a heraldic sentence carved for eternity. In the medieval world, a coat of arms was more than a fancy logo. It was a legal identity, a certified symbol of family lineage, land ownership, and personal honor. It was governed by laws as strict as any courts. To deliberately reverse a charge, to flip the lion or swap the tinctures was a formal act of heraldic defacement known as reversing the arms. This was the ultimate dishonor, a public declaration that the bearer had committed a crime so severe it voided his right to the family's honorable name. It was a shame that followed a man even into the grave. So who was this anonymous knight, and what could he have possibly done to deserve this? The historical detective work begins with the slab itself. Experts first scrutinize every other detail. The style of the armor can narrow the date to a specific decade of the Crusades. The craftsmanship of the carving might hint at a local Rhodian workshop or a mason brought from France. Any fragment of a Latin inscription, even a single letter, is a vital clue. Then they turn to the arms themselves. Even reversed, the design is identifiable. Archivists then dive into the vast, dusty records of the crusading orders, the Knights Hospitaller on Rhodes or the Teutonic Knights. They search for rolls of arms, grants of land, and lists of members, looking for a knight bearing that specific lion. Finding a match is the first breakthrough, giving the stone a name, but the name is only the beginning. The real mystery is the crime. The records of the military orders were meticulous, noting transgressions and punishments. The possible reasons for such a mark are as severe as they are evocative. Was he accused of cowardice in battle? In the heat of a siege, did he drop his banner and flee, costing men their lives and the order its honor? Perhaps his sin was one of betrayal. Did he conspire with the enemy, leaking the plans for a fortress or a naval assault for personal gain? Another possibility strikes at the very heart of the order's religious purpose. Could he have been found guilty of heresy or blasphemy, of denying the faith he swore to defend with his sword? Each crime carries its own dark story, a personal tragedy wrapped in the collapse of honor. There is, however, a more tragic and human possibility. What if the disgrace was not entirely his own? In the complex feudal world, a father's treason could condemn an entire family. A lord's rebellion against his king or grand master could result in the attainder of his title and the defacement of his arms. The knight buried here might have been a loyal son, caught in the catastrophic fallout of his father's ambition. He may have died still professing his own innocence, yet bearing the reversed arms as a warning to all who saw it, a warning about the cost of failure, the fragility of honor, and the long shadow cast by a single act. The stone does not whisper which story is true. It only presents the damning evidence, leaving us to weigh the possibilities in the silent air of the crypt, where a lion forever faces the wrong way. The reversed lion on a crusader's shield speaks of a disgrace written in stone, but in the Sedlec ossuary, the faces of the dead seem to speak for themselves. Beyond the world-famous chandelier of bones and the pyramids of femurs, guides point visitors toward a quieter, more unsettling phenomenon. They indicate a few specific skulls resting among the 40,000 others and invite you to look closely. From one angle, the empty sockets and fixed grin might appear neutral, a simple anatomical fact. But take a single step to the side, let the carefully placed artificial light shift across the bone, and something changes. The hollows seem to deepen into a look of profound sorrow. Tilt your head, and the same skull might appear to be caught in a silent, knowing smirk. Some visitors swear that in the absolute quiet, with the mind playing tricks, these skulls even seem to be whispering, their timeless gaze following you across the chamber. This is a textbook example of pareidolia, our brain's hardwired tendency to impose familiar patterns, especially human faces, on random shapes. We see the man in the moon, the face in the clouds, and yes, expression in a skull. But the mystery of Sedlec is not that pareidolia happens. It is why it happens so powerfully and consistently with these specific few skulls, and not the thousands of nearly identical others surrounding them. Is it simply the theatrical lighting of the ossuary casting dramatic shadows? Perhaps, but the effect persists even when viewed from different positions, suggesting the bone itself is the canvas. The answer may lie in their unique morphology. Every human skull is subtly different. The brow ridge might be more pronounced, the cheekbones higher or sharper, the dental structure more prominent. These tiny anatomical variations, carved by genetics and a lifetime of use, create a unique topography of bone. When light sweeps across these miniature landscapes, it hits ridges and valleys in ways that can profoundly alter the perceived expression. A deeper eye socket casts a longer shadow, suggesting sadness. A slightly asymmetrical alignment of the nasal aperture might create the illusion of a wry twist to the mouth. The skulls that speak to us are likely those with the most dramatic or unusual architecture, their features just exaggerated enough to trip our pattern recognition into overdrive. Yet there is a third crucial ingredient, the story we are told. The guide's suggestion is a powerful seed. Before you even look, you are primed to see a changing expression, to listen for a whisper. Your brain, eager to please and make sense of the suggestion, actively works to fulfill the expectation. It amplifies ambiguous shadows, interprets random pits in the bone as meaningful detail, and in the profound silence turns the rustle of your own clothing or the distant echo of a footstep into the hint of a sigh. The story gives the phenomenon a name, and our minds rush to fill in the blanks. This creates a fascinating loop between the objective and the subjective. The physical skull provides the unique, three-dimensional template. The controlled lighting provides the shifting visual stimulus, but the human narrative, the legend of the whispering skull, provides the context that transforms a random perceptual event into a personal, eerie experience. It is a collaborative haunting built equally from calcium phosphate and cultural suggestion. So are these skulls special? In a purely physical sense, yes, they are statistical outliers in the vast population of the ossuary. But their true power comes from the conversation they start between the silent past and the living, storytelling present. They remind us that we do not see with our eyes alone, but with our entire history of fears, stories, and the deep, human need to find a face, even a silent one, in the crowd of eternity. What secret, then, are you most prepared to hear? A single fresco in the Catacombs of Priscilla presents a miracle that history forgot. In a quiet, barrel-vaulted chamber, the painting shows a figure in simple robes, one hand raised in blessing. Before this saint kneels a man, his face etched with desperation, holding out a small, limp form, a child or perhaps an infant animal. From the saint's outstretched fingertips, a cascade of golden light falls upon the lifeless figure, which is shown stirring back to life, its eyes opening. The scene is rendered with a tenderness and clarity that feels immediate, a snapshot of divine intervention. Yet, when scholars search the exhaustive records of early Christian saints' lives, the hagiographies, they find no match. No known saint is described performing this specific act of restoration in this particular way. The fresco is a signature without a name, a story without a text. This visual anomaly sparks a fierce and fascinating debate. Who is this unrecorded miracle worker? One compelling theory suggests this was a local holy man or woman, a beloved figure within the specific community that used this catacomb. Their reputation for sanctity and power was so strong in their own neighborhood that they were painted among the martyrs and apostles, their story passed down orally. When that small community eventually dispersed or was absorbed by a larger congregation, the oral tradition faded, leaving only the image as a ghost of a personal faith. The fresco becomes a monument to a hyper-local saint whose fame never traveled beyond these tunnels. A more provocative idea is that this represents a story from a lost or suppressed gospel. The early centuries of Christianity were a ferment of competing texts and traditions. Many writings, now called apocryphal gospels, contained accounts of Jesus and his followers performing miracles not found in the canonical New Testament. Some of these texts were eventually declared heretical and were systematically destroyed. Could this fresco be a visual quotation from one of those vanished books? Perhaps a follower of a now unknown teacher had this scene painted, preserving in pigment a tale that the wider church sought to erase. The golden light falling from the fingertips is the only surviving verse of a forbidden scripture. Alternatively, the figure might not be a unique saint at all, but a symbolic composite. Early Christian art often used standardized scenes to represent broader theological ideas. The raising of a child could symbolize the resurrection of the soul or Christ's power over death, depicted through a generic, idealized holy figure. In this reading, the mystery is not about a lost person, but a lost symbolic language. The artists were not illustrating a specific biography. They were painting a doctrine using a visual shorthand that modern viewers, divorced from that cultural context, mistake for a portrait. The frustration for historians is palpable. Every other fresco in these catacombs can be cross-referenced: St. Peter with his keys, St. Paul with his scroll, Daniel in the lion's den. This one stands alone, a silent outlier. Technical analysis offers little help. The painting style dates it to the late 3rd century, a pivotal time when Christian iconography was still fluid. There are no hidden inscriptions, no clues in the mortar. The answer lies only in the intent of the person who commissioned it and the artist who brushed on those fading pigments. Were they documenting a truth they knew or envisioning a hope they desperately held? The fresco does not decide for us. It simply holds the moment of the miracle in perpetual suspension, a question painted in light and ochre, challenging us to wonder how many other saints and stories were left behind in the dark, remembered only by the stone. Buried in a sealed alcove, a tangle of rusted gears holds its secret tight. In the crypts beneath a Viennese church, perhaps St. Michael's, restorers working on a crumbling wall in the 1970s made a discovery that halted all work. Behind the loose bricks, they found not a hidden relic or a skeleton, but a machine. It was an intricate clockwork mechanism, a complex assembly of brass and iron gears, pinions, and a mainspring, all fused together by centuries of damp and oxidation. It was clearly man-made, a feat of precision engineering from the 18th or early 19th century. But it was not connected to anything. No wires, no rods leading to a bell tower, no face for a clock. It was a device built to perform a task, yet it seemed to perform absolutely nothing at all. Its very existence in a sacred burial vault is the first layer of the puzzle. Why place such a delicate technical object in a place of silent repose? The most practical theory paints a picture of subterranean security. Crypt robbery was a persistent, grim problem. Could this have been part of a forgotten alarm system? The mechanism might have been connected, via a now rotted cord or a thin metal rod, to a tripwire strung across a hidden entrance or a pressure plate on a valuable tomb. If disturbed, the trigger would release the mainspring, setting the gears spinning wildly. Their clattering, grinding noise in the stone vault would have been terrifyingly loud, echoing up through ventilation shafts to alert the priests above that intruders were below. It was a mechanical watchdog, its bark a symphony of grinding metal. A second idea is even more intriguing, that the gears were not an alarm but a key. Imagine a hidden door, a slab of stone pivoting on a central axle, leading to a private chapel or a tomb for relics. The mechanism, mounted on the wall beside it, might have acted as a primitive combination lock. Turning a specific sequence of smaller gears could align internal tumblers, releasing a catch that allowed the door to be pushed open. The correct sequence, known only to a trusted few, would have been lost with the last caretaker, leaving the door permanently sealed and the key rusting uselessly beside it. The machine becomes a sentinel for a space we can no longer even locate. Yet, the placement in a crypt suggests a more spiritual purpose. Could it have been an astronomical teaching device? In an age before electric planetariums, complex geared models were used to demonstrate the motions of the heavens. A priest or a scholarly sexton might have used this to illustrate the harmony of the spheres, the divine clockwork of the universe, to novices or mourners right there among the dead. The cyclical turning of the gears would mirror the eternal cycles of life, death, and resurrection, a metaphysical lesson made of brass and iron. The machine in this light is a sermon. Then there is the most human and perhaps most satisfying explanation of all, the elaborate joke. The church sextons of old were practical men, often with a dark, wry humor born from a lifetime spent with mortality. Could a particularly clever and bored sexton have built this beautiful, pointless machine simply to baffle his successors? He would have known that someday, someone would tear down that wall and find his creation, scratching their head in utter confusion for centuries to come. It is a prank across time, a legacy not of piety but of personality, a reminder that even in the crypts, the human spirit insists on a little playful mystery. Visualizing the mechanism is key to the puzzle. In your mind, see the close-up shot of the largest gear, its teeth worn but still sharply cut. Follow the shot as it tracks along a connecting rod to a smaller, intricate pinion, its center crusted with verdigris. The camera might pull back to show the entire assembly, a silent, frozen explosion of engineering, its purpose evaporated into the damp crypt air. Without a maker's mark or an accompanying diagram, it is a closed system. We can see how its parts interact, but we cannot see what it was meant to move or what signal it was meant to send. It represents a very specific kind of historical loss, not the loss of an object, but the loss of its function. We have the answer, but we have forgotten the question. This rusted knot of gears challenges our assumption that the past's innovations are always obvious. Sometimes they are simply beautiful, baffling dead ends, left in the dark for us to find and wonder if we are looking at a tool, a toy, or a message from a craftsman who never intended to be understood. The solemnity of a bishop's tomb is absolute. It is a space of embroidered vestments, heavy stone, and the cold weight of a pastoral staff or crozier laid to rest with its owner. So when restorers carefully opened the 14th century tomb of a bishop in a northern French cathedral, they expected only the dignified artifacts of office. Among the faded silks and tarnished metal, however, their fingers brushed against something that felt entirely out of place. It was a small, hand-carved wooden horse, its paint worn away by centuries, the grooves from a knife still visible along its simple, sturdy back. It was a child's toy, resting forever in the hands of a prince of the church. This single, humble object transforms the entire tomb from a monument into a bedroom. It introduces a whisper of innocence into a chamber dedicated to power, faith, and finality. The immediate question is disarmingly simple, yet it echoes with complex humanity. Why was it there? The first, most touching theory is sentimentality. Perhaps this bishop, a man who wielded immense spiritual and political authority, kept this one toy from his own childhood. It was a tactile memory of a life before theology, before responsibility, before the weight of a diocese rested on his shoulders. In an age of arranged careers and early commitments to the church, this horse might have been his last, secret connection to a boy who dreamed of forests and fields, not scriptures and synods. Placing it in his tomb was a final, private act, a way to carry that simple, free self into eternity. A second possibility looks outward to the community he served. Could it have been a gift from a parishioner, perhaps a poor woodcarver whose child the bishop had baptized or comforted? In a gesture of pure, unadorned affection, the family might have offered this simple creation, the best they had, to be buried with the holy man who had shown them kindness. For the bishop to accept it and honor it with a place beside his crozier would have been a profound statement of humility, a recognition that the faith of a child represented by a toy was as valuable as any golden relic. It reframes the tomb not as a display of ecclesiastical power, but as a collection of personal relationships frozen in time. Then there is the layer of lost symbolism. In medieval iconography, nothing was merely decorative. A horse could represent many things, the steed of a knight denoting spiritual battle, a symbol of worldly status tamed by religious duty, or even a reference to the four horsemen of the apocalypse, a memento mori about the inevitability of death. A spinning top might symbolize the fleeting, unstable nature of earthly life. What seems like a toy to our modern eyes might have carried a specific, understood meaning to the people who placed it there, a last sermon carved in lime wood. Yet, if that were the case, why is it so rare? Why don't we find such objects in other bishops' tombs? Its uniqueness argues against a common symbolic practice, pulling us back toward the personal. This tiny horse does more than pose a riddle. It performs a quiet miracle of historical empathy. scrolls decay, stone inscriptions weather, and official portraits present a controlled mask. But a toy is intimate, it is handled. Its surfaces are worn smooth by love and play. Its presence forces us to reimagine the bishop not as a stained glass figure, but as a man who once had small hands, who perhaps knelt on a rush-strewn floor to push this very horse along an imaginary road. It bridges the vast distance between his world and ours with the universal language of childhood. In that crypt among the symbols of heavenly glory, the most powerful artifact may be the one that speaks not of divinity, but of a shared human past. What other forgotten fragments of personality lie buried with the great, waiting to tell their small, true stories? A bishop's childhood toy is a secret kept for himself, but in the Parisian quarries, a secret was carved for no one at all. Far beyond the tourist paths, in a region of the catacombs known only to the most dedicated cataphiles, there exists a room that defies all reason. It is not a rough-hewn tunnel or a rectangular crypt. It is a perfect sphere. The chamber is carved with impossible precision from the solid limestone, its walls curving smoothly in every direction to form a complete, hollow globe buried within the earth. The only breach in its perfection is the small, ragged hole in the floor through which explorers enter, a hole that looks like a later, crude intrusion. Inside, there is nothing, no markings, no altars, no evidence of use, just the eerie, geometric purity of the space itself and the deafening question of why it is there. The sheer physical effort of its creation is the first staggering mystery. This was not done with modern power tools. It was carved by hand, likely in the 18th or 19th century, by quarrymen wielding picks and chisels. To create a perfect sphere underground without a fixed reference point like a horizon requires sophisticated knowledge of geometry and surveying. The workers would have had to constantly measure and adjust, removing stone millimeter by millimeter to maintain the curve. The volume of rock removed would have been immense, and all of it would have had to be hauled out through narrow tunnels. This was not a practical act, it was an act of obsession. So what drove that obsession? One theory suggests a secret meeting room for a clandestine society. The spherical shape has profound symbolic weight in esoteric traditions, representing unity, the cosmos, and perfection. Could this have been a hidden temple for Freemasons or Rosicrucians, where initiates met in a space designed to represent the universe? The lack of markings fits. Such groups often avoided permanent symbols that could betray them. The acoustics of a sphere are also unique. A whisper at one point can be heard clearly at the opposite point, a phenomenon known as a whispering gallery. This could have allowed for private conversations in the very center of the room, unheard by others standing near the walls. The chamber becomes a stone ear designed to carry secrets. A second idea is more scientific, an acoustic or geometric experiment. Perhaps a wealthy patron or a curious engineer commissioned the sphere to test the properties of sound transmission underground, or to serve as a physical model for astronomical calculations. In an age of enlightenment, such a private, costly experiment is not unthinkable. It would be a three-dimensional diagram, a thought experiment made real, later abandoned when the patron lost interest or funds ran dry. Then there is the wonderfully human possibility of a bored genius. Imagine a master quarryman, a true artist of the pick, who grew tired of cutting rectangular blocks for the city above. Perhaps on his own time, driven by a personal challenge or a quiet love of form, he began to carve this perfect shape. It was his masterpiece, a sculpture never meant to be seen, created for the simple, profound satisfaction of making it exist. Its purpose was the perfection itself, a testament to skill for its own sake, hidden away because its beauty required no audience. Skeptics, of course, cry hoax. They argue that with the cataphile subculture's love of myth-making, an irregular, rounded chamber could be exaggerated into a perfect sphere through rumor. Yet the accounts are too consistent from seasoned, sober explorers who take measurements. The sphere is real. The hoax theory, however, raises a darker question. What if it is a modern creation? Could a group of contemporary artists or engineers have secretly carved it in recent decades, adding a false antiquity to the catacombs lore? If so, the mystery is not why it was made centuries ago, but why someone would go to such dangerous, illegal lengths to create a puzzle with no solution. Standing in that spherical void produces a unique disorientation. The curved walls deny your eyes any straight line to focus on. Your voice sounds strangely muted, absorbed by the stone. You are inside a giant, buried bubble, a perfect geometric idea given silent, heavy form. It offers no clues, only its own existence. This makes it perhaps the purest of all the catacomb mysteries. It is not a tomb, a treasury, or a temple with a guest at purpose. It is a question carved in rock, a single, spherical why hanging in the dark, challenging anyone who finds it to wonder if the greatest secrets are not those that are hidden, but those that have no reason to be hidden at all. That perfect sphere is a question carved in stone, but a clenched hand in an ossuary holds an answer no one wants to claim. In a bone chapel in Eastern Europe, perhaps in Poland or Hungary, archaeologists carefully lifted a skull from a neat stack. As they did, a skeletal hand fell loose from the ribcage and something clattered to the stone floor. It was a single, tarnished silver coin. This, at first, was no surprise. The ancient Greek and Roman practice of placing a coin in the mouth or hand of the deceased as payment for charon, the ferryman of the river Styx, was widespread. It was a passport for the soul, a final transaction to secure passage from the world of the living to the realm of the dead. But when the team cleaned the coin and identified it, a chill settled over the excavation. This was no generic Roman denarius. It was a specific issue minted centuries later by a small, independent city-state infamous in regional history for a single, catastrophic act of sacrilege. According to chronicles, the rulers of this city had, in a brazen act of defiance, seized a holy relic from a major church or monastery, an act that was said to have brought a swift and terrible divine retribution upon them, a plague, a military collapse, or a fire that consumed their treasury. The city itself faded into obscurity, but its coins, stamped with its proud insignia, became artifacts of a cursed legacy. The coin in the skeleton's hand was a direct piece of that condemned history. The local folklore was immediate and unequivocal. That coin was not just payment for charon, it was contaminated. The misfortune of its origin city had soaked into the metal, and by placing it with the dead, the living had attempted to bury that bad luck forever. To disturb it, to pull it back into the world of light and air, was to invite its curse to follow you home. This is where archaeology collides headlong with narrative. The alleged curse did not wait to manifest. The lead archaeologist on the dig, a staunch rationalist, reportedly kept the coin on his desk as a paperweight. Within a year, the stories say, a series of personal and professional calamities befell him. A rare manuscript he was preparing for publication was destroyed in a laboratory flood. A key grant for his next expedition was unexpectedly denied. Most chillingly, he suffered a sudden, severe illness that baffled his doctors, a fever that came and went without diagnosis. His colleagues, whispering over maps and coffee, began to connect the dots. The coin, they felt, was the common denominator. One by one, others who had handled it closely reported their own streaks of bad luck. Failed equipment at critical moments, broken bones from simple falls, a pervasive sense of unease in the lab where it was stored. The curse, it seemed, had a paperwork trail of misery. From a scientific standpoint, the explanation is a cascade of cognitive bias. This is the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, the belief that because one event followed another, the first must have caused the second. The human brain is a pattern-seeking machine, especially when faced with fear and the unknown. Once the story of the coin's origin was known, every subsequent negative event was filtered through that lens. A denied grant, the curse; a common cold, the curse; a slipped tile on the roof, absolutely the curse. the power of suggestion, especially when wrapped in a compelling historical tragedy, is immense. It creates a feedback loop where expectation shapes perception. Furthermore, archaeology is a profession fraught with inherent risk and frustration. Funding is always precarious, equipment fails in remote locations, and ancient sites are physically dangerous places. To attribute these routine occupational hazards to a supernatural cause is a way to give chaotic misfortune a name and a story, making it feel somehow more manageable, even if more terrifying. Yet, to dismiss the curse as mere psychology misses its deeper function. This superstition performs a kind of protective ethics. In many cultures, disturbing the dead is seen as a transgression. The curse story enforces a layer of respect, a cultural break on careless excavation. It says these remains are not just data, they are people, and they carry history with them, sometimes a heavy history. The misfortune that follows might not be magical, but it is real. It is the weight of responsibility, the psychological burden of knowing you have pulled a story of sacrilege and punishment back into the present. So, is the coin cursed? The metal itself is inert. The curse is a narrative, a story we tell about the past's ability to reach into the present. It lives in the hesitation of a researcher's hand over a find, in the shared glance between dig members when something goes wrong, in the way a simple piece of silver can make a room full of scientists speak in hushed tones. The skeleton did not clutch a spell. It clutched a story so powerful that, centuries later, we are still afraid to close the book. What happens when the past we unearth carries a warning we feel in our bones? A single cursed coin holds a story of divine retribution, but one lost library holds the story of the ancient world itself. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is a historical wound, a symbol of incalculable knowledge vanishing in smoke. Yet, a stubborn fringe theory whispers that not everything was lost. It suggests that in the library's final days, as political chaos or religious zealotry threatened its shelves, a desperate, secret operation was launched. Loyal scholars and custodians, the story goes, smuggled out the most precious scrolls, works by lost philosophers, unique histories, scientific treatises, and shipped them to safe houses along the Mediterranean. Their final hiding place, according to this legend, was not a fortress or a temple, but the silent, anonymous depths of coastal catacombs. Networks like Alexandria's own Calm el-Shakafa, with its labyrinthine passages and Roman-Egyptian secrecy, are named as prime candidates. Could the greatest repository of ancient wisdom be waiting, not as ash, but as moldering papyrus in a sealed, damp crypt? The logistical plausibility is the first hurdle, and it is steep but not impossible. We know the library suffered multiple destructive events over centuries, not one single fire. Each crisis would have provided a motive and a moment for salvage. The individuals involved, librarians, scribes, wealthy patrons, would have had the means to organize small, discreet shipments. Transporting scrolls by boat to other Roman cities like Naples, Rome, or even Marseille was routine trade. The catacombs in these port cities were active, managed spaces. A sympathetic Christian community or a private family with a tomb could have been persuaded, for a price or out of shared respect for learning, to conceal crates not of treasure but of texts. The act would have been one of quiet preservation, not dramatic heroics. The scrolls would have been placed in a dry side chamber, sealed behind a false wall of rubble, and forgotten with the hope of a safer future that never came. The crushing counterargument, of course, is the utter and complete lack of evidence. Not a single archaeological find in any catacomb anywhere has ever yielded a classical literary scroll. The environmental conditions are also a brutal enemy of this dream. Catacombs are famously damp. Papyrus and parchment are organic. They require exceptionally dry, stable conditions to survive millennia, like the desert caves of Qumran that preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls. The humid, microbial air of a Mediterranean catacomb is a preservation nightmare. Any scrolls hidden there would likely have dissolved into a black, unreadable pulp within a few centuries, leaving no trace for modern tools to detect. Furthermore, if such a monumental secret were kept, why is there no hint in any historical record, no coded letter, no later rumor from a descendant of those who hid them? The silence is deafening, yet the theory persists, and its endurance is more revealing than its plausibility. It speaks to our profound refusal to accept that loss. The Library of Alexandria represents the pinnacle of ancient thought, a single point where humanity almost grasped everything. To believe that some part of it survived hidden in the earth is to keep a door open to that lost world. It transforms every unknown chamber, every sealed niche in a coastal catacomb, into a potential treasure room of the mind. Explorers who entertain this idea are not just looking for artifacts, they are looking for the lost voices of Aristotle, the complete histories of Babylon, the plays of Sophocles we have never read. They are searching for the second half of a conversation the ancient world started. So is the theory true? Almost certainly not, but it serves a vital purpose. It charges these underground spaces with an extra layer of profound potential. It reminds us that catacombs were not just for bodies, they were for secrets. And what greater secret could there be than the rescued memory of civilization itself? The next time you see a photograph of a dark, empty chamber in Qalm el-Shakafa, you might, for just a second, wonder not about the bones that are there, but about the books that are not. It is the ultimate historical ghost story, a tale of what might still be waiting in the dark, not for a curse, but for a reader. A single, tarnished coin can carry the weight of a curse, and a hidden library might hold the ghost of lost wisdom, but the most pervasive mystery of the catacombs is not hidden at all. It is displayed openly in the very architecture of the dead. From the geometric mandala in Brno to the chandelier in Sedlec, from the whispering skulls to the silent, stacked walls of Paris, one question echoes louder than all the specific riddles. Why did so many communities across centuries and cultures feel compelled to turn human remains into art? This final philosophical mystery ties all the others together, asking not about a single event, but about a universal human impulse. On the surface, the most practical explanation is space. Cemeteries filled up, especially in crowded medieval cities and after devastating plagues. Exhuming old bones to make room for new burials was a grim necessity. Simply tossing the anonymous remains into a pit felt disrespectful, a final indignity. Arranging them with order, stacking femurs neatly, piling skulls into pyramids was a solution. It was efficient storage, but performed with a sense of dignity, a way to bring a somber order to the chaotic aftermath of mass death. The ossuary was a filing cabinet for souls, where the sheer volume of mortality demanded a system. Yet the breathtaking artistry we see in places like Sedlec shatters the idea of mere utility. No one needs a chandelier containing every bone in the human body to save space. That is something else entirely. This is where the concept of memento mori, remember you must die, transcends a simple warning. It becomes an active dialogue. By taking the most potent symbol of our mortality, the bare skeleton, and transforming it into something intricate, even beautiful, these communities were performing a profound alchemy. They were not just remembering death, they were reframing it. The act of creation, of imposing artistic will upon the remains, was a defiance. It said, yes, this is our end. But look what we can make from it. It was a way to stare into the void and not just flinch, but to decorate its edges. This artistic impulse also points to a deep, communal form of reverence. In an age before widespread literacy, art was theology. A bone chandelier was not merely macabre decor, it was a three-dimensional sermon. Its very form, a source of light crafted from death, illustrated the Christian hope of resurrection, that from these dry bones new and eternal life would spring. The intricate patterns, the symmetrical designs, spoke of a divine order imposed upon the chaos of earthly decay. To arrange the bones of thousands of anonymous individuals into a single, unified structure was a powerful statement of equality. In death, the pauper and the prince were literally woven together, their distinct identities dissolved into a collective artwork, a visual promise that all souls were equal before God. But perhaps the deepest driver was a need for narrative control. Death is the ultimate unknown, the great silent mystery. It strips away identity, story, and voice. By arranging bones, the living were writing a final, collective story for the dead. They were giving anonymous remains a new identity, not as individuals but as part of a larger, meaningful pattern. A cathedral of bone, a heraldic shield of ribs, a silent choir of skulls. This act transformed the catacomb from a storage facility into a storybook where the chapters were written in radius and ulna, and the moral was carved in calcium. It was a way to provide an ending where nature offered only dissolution. So, were these places of horror or of holiness? The answer is they were and are both. They represent humanity's most honest confrontation with the one certainty we all share. Every carved bone, every stacked skull, every artistic flourish is a fingerprint of a human hand reaching across time, trying to make peace with the inevitable. The catacombs do not hide from death. They institutionalize it, decorate it, and speak to it. They are the ultimate canvas where the living have painted for centuries their fear, their faith, and their fragile, beautiful hope that something of us endures, even if only as a pattern in the dark. The final mystery is not in the bones themselves, but in the unwavering human light that insisted on arranging them. Our journey through the shadows has spanned continents and centuries, from the lost soul of Paris to the breathing sarcophagus of Sicily. These 35 unsolved mysteries are more than a list of eerie facts. Together, they reveal a profound truth about the catacombs themselves. They are not static tombs frozen in the past. They are active repositories, dynamic vaults that continue to hold history, challenge art, and breathe human mystery into the present day. Each unanswered question, from the purpose of a rusted gearbox to the identity of a forgotten saint in a fresco, is a thread still connecting us to the people who carved these spaces. It is the unknown that keeps history alive and fiercely engaging, transforming dry dates and names into a living, breathing puzzle we are all invited to help solve. So now, we turn the final question over to you. Which of these 35 enigmas captivated your imagination the most? Was it the echoing choir of bones in Vienna, the hidden cinema beneath Paris, or the lonely toy in the bishop's tomb? Share your thoughts and your own catacomb stories in the comments below. And if you're drawn to history's hidden corners, subscribe to join us as we continue to explore the deepest mysteries, one forgotten